The commission has designed the format, 6 roughly 15-minute segments with 2-minute answers to the first question, then open discussion for the rest of the segment. Both campaigns have agreed to those rules. For the I decided the topics and the questions in each topic. None of those questions has been shared with the commission or the 2 candidates. The audience here in the hall has promised to remain silent. No cheers, boos, or other interruptions so we and you can focus on what the candidates have to say. No noise except right now as we welcome the Democratic nominee for president, Secretary Clinton, and the Republican nominee for president, Mr. Trump. Secretary Clinton, Mr. Trump, welcome. Let's get right to it. The first topic is the Supreme Court. You both talked briefly about the court in the last debate, but I want to drill down on this because the next president will almost certainly have at least 1 appointment and likely or possibly 2 or 3 appointments, which means that you will, in effect, determine the balance of the court for what could be the next quarter century. First of all, where do you want to see the court take the country? And secondly, what's your view on how the Constitution should be interpreted? Do the founders' words mean what they say, or is it a living document to be applied flexibly according to changing circumstances? In this segment, Secretary Clinton, you go first. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thanks to UNLV for hosting us. You know, I think when we talk about the Supreme Court, it really raises the central issue in this election, namely, what kind of country are we going to be? What kind of opportunities will we provide for our citizens? What kind of rights will Americans have? And I feel strongly that the Supreme Court needs to stand on the side of the American people, not on the side of the powerful, corporations, and the wealthy. For me, that means that we need a Supreme Court that will stand up on behalf of women's rights, on behalf of the rights of the LGBT community, that will stand up and say no to Citizens United, a decision that has undermined the election system in our country because of the way it permits dark, unaccountable money to come into our electoral system. I have major disagreements with my opponent about these issues and others that will be before the Supreme Court. But I feel that at this point in our country's history, it is important that we not reverse marriage equality, that we not reverse Roe v. Wade, that we stand up against Citizens United, we stand up for the rights of people in the workplace, that we stand up and basically say the Supreme Court should represent all of us. That's how I see the court, and the kind of people that I would be looking to nominate to the court would be in the great tradition of standing up to the powerful, standing up on behalf of our rights as Americans. And I look forward to having that opportunity. I would hope that the Senate would do its job and confirm the nominee that President Obama has sent to them. That's the way the Constitution fundamentally should operate. The president nominates, and then the Senate advises and consents or not, but they go forward with the process.
Secretary Clinton, thank you. Mr. Trump, same question. Where do you want to see the court take the country, and how do you believe the Constitution should be interpreted?
Well, first of all, it's great to be with you, and thank you, everybody. The Supreme Court, it's what it's all about. Our country is it's just so imperative that we have the right justices. Something happened recently where Justice Ginsburg made some very, very inappropriate statements toward me and toward a tremendous number of people, many, many millions of people that I represent. And she was forced to apologize, and apologize she did. But these were statements that should never, ever have been made. We need a Supreme Court that, in my opinion, is going to uphold the Second Amendment and all amendments, but the Second Amendment, which is under absolute siege. I believe if my opponent should win this race, which I truly don't think will happen, We will have a Second Amendment, which will be a very, very small replica of what it is right now. But I feel that it's absolutely important that we uphold because of the fact that it is under such trauma. I feel that the justices that I am going to appoint, and I've named 20 of them, the justices that I'm going to appoint will be pro-life. They will have a conservative bent. They will be protecting the Second Amendment. They are great scholars in all cases, and they're people of tremendous respect. They will interpret the Constitution the way the founders wanted it interpreted, and I believe that's very, very important. I don't think we should have justices appointed that decide what they want to hear. It's all about the Constitution and so important, the Constitution the way it was meant to be. And those are the people that I will appoint.
Mr. Trump, thank you. We now have about 10 minutes for an open discussion. I want to focus on two issues that, in fact, by the justices that you name, could end up changing the existing law of the land. First is one that you mentioned, Mr. Trump, and that is guns. Secretary Clinton, you said last year, and let me quote, "The Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment." And now, in fact, in the 2008 Heller case, the court ruled that there is a constitutional right to bear arms, but a right that is reasonably limited. Those were the words of the judge, Antonin Scalia, who wrote the decision. What's wrong with that?
Well, first of all, I support the Second Amendment. I lived in Arkansas for 18 wonderful years. I represented upstate New York. I understand and respect the tradition of gun ownership. It goes back to the founding of our country. But I also believe that there can be and must be reasonable regulation. Because I support the Second Amendment doesn't mean that I want people who shouldn't have guns to be able to threaten you, kill you or members of your family. And so when I think about what we need to do, we have 33,000 people a year who die from guns. I think we need comprehensive background checks, need to close the online loophole, close the gun show loophole. There's other matters that I think are sensible, that are the kind of reforms that would make a difference, that are not in any way conflicting with the Second Amendment. You mentioned the Heller decision, and what I was saying that you referenced, Chris, was that I disagreed with the way the court applied the Second Amendment in that case, because what the District of Columbia was trying to do was to protect toddlers from guns. And so they wanted people with guns to safely store them. And the court didn't accept that reasonable regulation, but they've accepted many others. So I see no conflict between saving people's lives and defending the Second Amendment.
Let me bring Mr. Trump in here. The Bipartisan Open Debate Coalition got millions of votes on questions to ask here, and this was, in fact, one of the top questions that they got. How will you ensure the Second Amendment is protected? You just heard Secretary Clinton's answer. Does she persuade you that while you may disagree on regulation, that in fact she supports a Second Amendment right to bear arms?
Well, the D.C. versus Heller decision was very strongly, and she was extremely angry about it. I watched. I mean, she was very, very angry when upheld. And Justice Scalia was so involved, and it was a well-crafted decision. But Hillary was extremely upset, extremely angry, and people that believe in the Second Amendment and believe in it very strongly were very upset with what she had to say.
Well, let me bring in Secretary Clinton. Were you extremely upset?
Well, I was upset because, unfortunately, dozens of toddlers injure themselves, even kill people with guns, because, unfortunately, not everyone who has loaded guns in their homes takes appropriate precautions. But there's no doubt that I respect the Second Amendment, that I also believe there's an individual right to bear arms. That is not in conflict with sensible, common sense regulation. And, you know, look, I understand that Donald's been strongly supported by the NRA. The gun lobby's on his side. They're running millions of dollars of ads against me. And I regret that, because what I would like to see is for people to come together and say, of course, we're going to protect and defend the Second Amendment, but we're going to do it in a way that tries to save some of these 33,000 lives that we lose every year.
Let me bring Mr. Trump back into that, because, in fact, you oppose any limits on assault weapons, any limits on high-capacity magazines. You support a national right-to-carry law. Why, sir?
Well, let me just tell you, before we go any further, in Chicago, which has the toughest gun laws in the United States, probably you could say by far, they have more gun violence than any other city. So we have the toughest laws, and you have tremendous gun violence. I am a very strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and I don't know if Hillary was saying it in a sarcastic manner, but I'm very proud to have the endorsement of the NRA, and it's the earliest endorsement they've ever given to anybody who ran for president. So I'm very honored by all of that. We are going to appoint justices. This is the best way to help the Second Amendment. We are going to appoint justices that will feel very strongly about the Second Amendment, that will not do damage to the Second Amendment.
Well, let's pick up on another issue which divides you and the justices that whoever ends up winning this election appoints could have a dramatic effect there, and that's the issue of abortion.
Right.
Mr. Trump, you're pro-life, but I want to ask you specifically, do you want the court, including the justices that you will name, to overturn Roe v. Wade, which includes, in fact, states a woman's right to abortion?
Well, if that would happen, because I am pro-life and I will be appointing pro-life judges, I would think that that will go back to the individual states.
But I'm asking you specifically, would you
If they overturned it, it'll go back to the states.
But what I'm asking you, sir, is do you want to see the court overturn? You just said you want to see the court protect the Second Amendment. Do you want to see the court overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, if we put another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on, that's really what's going to be, that will happen. And that'll happen automatically, in my opinion, because I am putting pro-life justices on the court. I will say this, it will go back to the states, and the states will then make a determination.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, I strongly support Roe v. Wade, which guarantees a constitutional right to a woman to make the most intimate, most difficult in many cases, decisions about her health care that one can imagine. And in this case, it's not only about Roe v. Wade. It is about what's happening right now in America. So many states are putting very stringent regulations on women that block them from exercising that choice, to the extent that they are defunding Planned Parenthood, which, of course, provides all kinds of cancer screenings and other benefits for women in our country. Donald has said he's in favor of defunding Planned Parenthood. He even supported shutting the government down to defund Planned Parenthood. I will defend Planned Parenthood. I will defend Roe v. Wade, and I will defend women's rights to make their own health care decisions. And we have come too far to have that turned back now. And indeed, he said women should be punished, that there should be some form of punishment for women who obtain abortions. And I could just not be more opposed to that kind of thinking.
I'm going to give you a chance to respond, but I want to ask you, Secretary Clinton, I want to explore how far you believe the right to abortion goes. You have been quoted as saying that the fetus has no constitutional rights. You also voted against a ban on late-term partial birth abortions. Why?
Because Roe v. Wade very clearly sets out that there can be regulations on abortion so long as the life and the health of the mother are taken into account. And when I voted as a senator, I did not think that that was the case. The kinds of cases that fall at the end of pregnancy are often the most heartbreaking, painful decisions for families to make. I have met with women who, toward the end of their pregnancy, get the worst news one could get, that their health is in jeopardy if they continue to carry to term, or that something terrible has happened or just been discovered about the pregnancy. I do not think the United States government should be stepping in and making those most personal of decisions. So you can regulate if you are doing so with the life and the health of the mother taken into account.
Mr. Trump, your reaction, and particularly on this issue of late-term partial birth
Well,
abortion.
I think it's terrible. If you go with what Hillary is saying, in the 9th month, you can take the baby and rip the baby out of the womb of the mother just prior to the birth of the baby. Now, you can say that that's okay, and Hillary can say that that's okay, but it's not okay with me. Because based on what she's saying and based on where she's going and where she's been, you can take the baby and rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month on the final day. And that's not acceptable.
Well, that is not what happens in these cases. And using that kind of scare rhetoric is just terribly unfortunate. You should meet with some of the women that I've met with, women I've known over the course of my life. This is one of the worst possible choices that any woman and her family has to make. And I do not believe the government should be making it. You know, I've had the great honor of traveling across the world on behalf of our country. I've been to countries where governments either forced women to have abortions like they used to do in China or forced women to bear children like they used to do in Romania. And I can tell you the government has no business in the decisions that women make with their families in accordance with their faith, with medical advice, and I will stand up for that right.
All right. But just briefly, I want to move on to another
honestly,
segment.
Nobody has business doing what I just said, doing that as late as 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 days prior to birth. Nobody has that.
All right. Let's move on to the subject of immigration. And there is almost no issue that separates the two of you more than the issue of immigration. Actually, there are a lot of issues that separate the two of you. Mr. Trump, you want to build a wall. Secretary Clinton, you have offered no specific plan for how you want to secure our southern border. Mr. Trump, you are calling for major deportations. Secretary Clinton, you say that within your first 100 days as president, you're going to offer a package that includes a pathway to citizenship. The question really is, why are you right and your opponent wrong? Mr. Trump, you go first in this segment. You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, she wants to give amnesty, which is a disaster and very unfair to all of the people that are waiting in line for many, many years. We need strong borders. In the audience tonight, we have 4 mothers of, I mean, these are unbelievable people that I've gotten to know over a period of years whose children have been killed, brutally killed by people that came into the country illegally. You have thousands of mothers and fathers and relatives all over the country. They're coming in illegally. Drugs are pouring in through the border. We have no country if we have no border. Hillary wants to give amnesty. She wants to have open borders. The border secure, as you know, the Border Patrol agents, 16,500 plus ICE last week endorsed me. First time they've ever endorsed a candidate. It means their job is tougher, but they know what's going on. They know it better than anybody. They want strong borders. They feel we have to have strong borders. I was up in New Hampshire the other day. The biggest complaint they have, it's with all of the problems going on in the world, many of the problems caused by Hillary Clinton and by Barack Obama, all of the problems, their single biggest problem is heroin that pours across our southern borders, just pouring and destroying their youth. It's poisoning the blood of their youth and plenty of other people. We have to have strong borders. We have to keep the drugs out of our country. Right now, we're getting the drugs, they're getting the cash. We need strong borders. We need we cannot give amnesty. Now, I want to build the wall. We need the wall. The Border Patrol, ICE, they all want the wall. We stop the drugs. We shore up the border. One of my first acts will be to get all of the drug lords, all of the bad ones. We have some bad people in this country that have to go out. We're going to get them out. We're going to secure the border. And once the border is secured, at a later date, we'll make a determination as to the rest. But we have some bad hombres here, and we're going to get them out.
Mr. Trump, thank you. Same question to you, Secretary Clinton. Basically, why are you right and Mr. Trump is wrong?
Well, as he was talking, I was thinking about a young girl I met here in Las Vegas, Carla, who was very worried that her parents might be deported because she was born in this country, but they were not. They work hard. They do everything they can to give her a good life. And you're right. I don't want to rip families apart. I don't want to be sending parents away from children. I don't want to see the deportation force that Donald has talked about in action in our country. We have 11 million undocumented people. They have 4 million American citizen children, 15 million people. He said as recently as a few weeks ago in Phoenix that every undocumented person would be subject to deportation. Now, here's what that means. It means you would have to have a massive law enforcement presence, where law enforcement officers would be going school to school, home to home, business to business, rounding up people who are undocumented. And we would then have to put them on trains, on buses to get them out of our country. I think that is an idea that is not in keeping with who we are as a nation. I think it's an idea that would rip our country apart. I have been for border security for years. I voted for border security in the United States Senate. And my comprehensive immigration reform plan, of course, includes border security. But I want to put our resources where I think they're most needed, getting rid of any violent person, anybody who should be deported, we should deport them. When it comes to the wall that Donald talks about building, he went to Mexico. He had a meeting with the Mexican president, didn't even raise it. He choked. And then got into a Twitter war because the Mexican president said, we're not paying for that wall. So I think we are both a nation of immigrants and we are a nation of laws, and that we can act accordingly. And that's why I'm introducing comprehensive immigration reform within the first 100 days with a path to citizenship.
Thank you, Secretary Clinton. I want to follow up.
I think I should respond to that. First of all, I had a very good meeting with the president of Mexico, very nice man. We will be doing very much better with Mexico on trade deals, believe me. The NAFTA deal signed by her husband is one of the worst deals ever made of any kind, signed by anybody. It's a disaster. Hillary Clinton wanted the wall. Hillary Clinton fought for the wall in 2006 or thereabouts. Now, she never gets anything done, so naturally the wall wasn't built. But Hillary Clinton wanted the wall.
Well,
we are a country of laws. And by the way,
no, wait. I'd like to hear from.
I'd like
to hear from Secretary Clinton.
I voted for border security, and there are some limited places where that was appropriate. There also is necessarily going to be new technology and how best to deploy that. But it is clear when you look at what Donald has been proposing. He started his campaign bashing immigrants, calling Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals and drug dealers, that he has a very different view about what we should do to deal with immigrants. Now, what I am also arguing is that bringing undocumented immigrants out from the shadows, putting them into the formal economy will be good, because then employers can't exploit them and undercut Americans' wages. And Donald knows a lot about this. He used undocumented labor to build the Trump Tower. He underpaid undocumented workers, and when they complained, he basically said what a lot of employers do. You complain, I'll get you deported. I want to get everybody out of the shadows, get the economy working, and not let employers like Donald exploit undocumented workers, which hurts them but also hurts American workers.
Mr. Trump.
President Obama has moved millions of people out. Nobody knows about it. Nobody talks about it. But under Obama, millions of people have been moved out of this country. They've been deported. She doesn't want to say that, but that's what's happened. And that's what's happened big league. As far as moving these people out and moving, we either have a country or we don't. We're a country of laws. We either have a border or we don't. Now, you can come back in and you can become a citizen, but it's very unfair. We have millions of people that did it the right way. They're online, they're waiting. We're going to speed up the process, big league, because it's very inefficient. But they're online and they're waiting to become citizens. Very unfair that somebody runs across the border, becomes a citizen. Under her plan, you have open borders. You would have a disaster on trade, and you will have a disaster with your open borders. But what she doesn't say is that President Obama has deported millions and millions of people just the way it is.
Secretary Clinton, I want to.
We will not have open borders.
Well,
that is a rank mischaracterization.
Secretary Clinton.
We will have secure borders, but we will also have reform. And this used to be a bipartisan issue. Ronald Reagan was the last president to sign immigration reform, and George W. Bush supported it as well.
Secretary Clinton, I want to clear up your position on this issue, because in a speech you gave to a Brazilian bank for which you were paid $225,000, we've learned from the WikiLeaks that you said this, and I want to quote, "My dream is a hemispheric common market with open trade and open borders." So That's
Thank
the
you.
question. That's the question. Please quiet, everybody. Is that your dream, open borders?
Well, if you went on to read the rest of the sentence, I was talking about energy. You know, we trade more energy with our neighbors than we trade with the rest of the world combined. And I do want us to have an electric grid, an energy system that crosses borders. I think that will be a great benefit to us. But you are very clearly quoting from WikiLeaks. And what's really important about WikiLeaks is that the Russian government has engaged in espionage against Americans. They have hacked American websites, American accounts of private people, of institutions. Then they have given that information to WikiLeaks for the purpose of putting it on the internet. This has come from the highest levels of the Russian government, clearly from Putin himself, in an effort, as 17 of our intelligence agencies have confirmed, to influence our election. So I actually think the most important question of this evening, Chris, is finally, will Donald Trump admit and condemn that the Russians are doing this and make it clear that he will not have the help of Putin in this election, that he rejects Russian espionage against Americans, which he actually encouraged in the past? Those are the questions we need answered. We've never had anything like this happen in any of our elections before.
That was a great pivot off the fact that she wants open borders, okay? How did we get onto Putin?
Hold on.
No.
Wait. Hold on, folks, because this is going to end up getting out of control. Let's try to keep it quiet for the candidates and for the American people. Go ahead.
Just to finish on the borders.
Yes.
She wants open borders. People are going to pour into our country. People are going to come in from Syria. She wants 550% more people than Barack Obama. And he has thousands and thousands of people. They have no idea where they come from. And you see, we are going to stop radical Islamic terrorism in this country. She won't even mention the words, and neither will President Obama. So I just want to tell you, she wants open borders. Now we can talk about Putin. I don't know Putin. He said nice things about me. If we got along well, that would be good. If Russia and the United States got along well and went after ISIS, that would be good. He has no respect for her. He has no respect for our president. And I'll tell you what, we're in very serious trouble because we have a country with tremendous numbers of nuclear warheads, 1,800, by the way, where they expanded and we didn't. 1,800 nuclear warheads. And she's playing chicken. Look, Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit that the
puppet.
Russians have engaged in cyber attacks against the United States of America, that you encouraged espionage against our people, that you are willing to spout the Putin line, sign up for his wish list, break up NATO, do whatever he wants to do, and that you continue to get help from him because he has a very clear favorite in this race. So I think that this is such an unprecedented situation. We've never had a foreign government trying to interfere in our election. We have 17 intelligence agencies, civilian and military, who have all concluded that these espionage attacks, these cyber attacks, come from the highest levels of the Kremlin, and they are designed to influence our election. I find that deeply disturbing, and I think it's
time. She has no idea whether it's Russia, China, or anybody else.
I am not quoting myself.
No idea.
I am quoting
Hillary, you
17.
Have no idea.
17 intelligence. Do you doubt 17
our
military
has
and
no
civilian agencies? Well,
yeah,
he'd rather believe Vladimir Putin than the military and civilian intelligence professionals who are sworn to protect us. I find that just absolutely.
She doesn't like Putin because Putin has outsmarted her at every step of the way. Excuse me. Putin has outsmarted her in Syria. He's outsmarted her every step of the way.
I do get to ask some questions.
Yes, that's
and I would like to ask you this direct question. The top national security officials of this country do believe that Russia has been behind these hacks. Even if you don't know for sure whether they are, do you condemn any interference by Russia in the American election?
By Russia or anybody else.
You condemn their interference.
Of course I condemn. Of course I can. I don't know Putin. I have
I'm
no
not
idea.
asking you. I'm asking
I
you,
never
do you
met
condemn?
Putin. This is not my best friend. But if the United States got along with Russia, wouldn't be so bad. Let me tell you, Putin has outsmarted her and Obama at every single step of the way. Whether it's Syria, no, you name it, missiles. Take a look at the startup that they signed. The Russians have said, according to many, many reports, I can't believe they allowed us to do this. They create warheads and we can't. The Russians can't believe it. She has been outsmarted by Putin, and all you have to do is look at the Middle East. They've taken over. We've spent $6 trillion. They've taken over the Middle East. She has been outsmarted and outplayed worse than anybody I've ever seen in any government whatsoever.
We're a long way away from immigration, but I'm going to let you finish this topic.
Well,
You got about 45 seconds.
Yeah,
And she always will be.
I find it ironic that he's raising nuclear weapons. This is a person who has been very cavalier, even casual, about the use of nuclear weapons. He's advocated more countries getting them, Japan, Korea, even Saudi Arabia. He's said, well, if we have them, why don't we use them, which I think is terrifying. But here's the deal. The bottom line on nuclear weapons is that when the president gives the order, it must be followed. There's about 4 minutes between the order being given and the people responsible for launching nuclear weapons to do so. And that's why 10 people who have had that awesome responsibility have come out and in an unprecedented way said they would not trust Donald Trump with the nuclear codes or to have his finger on the nuclear button.
I have 200 generals and admirals, 21 endorsing me, 21 Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. As far as Japan and other countries, we are being ripped off by everybody in the world. We're defending other countries. We are spending a fortune doing it. They have the bargain of the century. All I said is we have to renegotiate these agreements because our country cannot afford to defend Saudi Arabia, Japan, Germany, South Korea, and many other places. We cannot continue to afford. She took that as saying nuclear weapons. Look, she's been proven to be a liar on so many different ways. This is just another lie.
Well, I'm just quoting you when
There's
you were
no
asked
quote.
about
You're not going to find a quote from me.
Nuclear competition in Asia. You said, you know, go ahead, enjoy yourselves, folks. That kind
And defend
of language,
yourselves. And
the
defend
United
yourselves. I didn't say
States has
nuclear.
kept
And
the
defend
peace.
yourself.
The United States has kept the peace through our alliances. Donald wants to tear up our alliances. I think it makes the world safer, and frankly, it makes the United States safer. I would work with our allies in Asia, in Europe, in the Middle East, and elsewhere. That's the only way we're going to be able to keep the peace.
We are going to move on to the next topic, which is the economy, and I hope we handle that as well as we did immigration. You also have very different ideas about how to get the economy growing faster. Secretary Clinton, in your plan, government plays a big role. You see more government spending, more entitlements, more tax credits, more tax penalties. Mr. Trump, you want to get government out with lower taxes and less regulation.
Yes.
We're going to drill down into this a little bit more. But in this overview, please explain to me why you believe that your plan will create more jobs and growth for this country and your opponent's plan will not. In this round, you go first, Secretary Clinton.
Well, I think when the middle class thrives, America thrives. And so my plan is based on growing the economy, giving middle class families many more opportunities. I want us to have the biggest jobs program since World War II, jobs in infrastructure and advanced manufacturing. I think we can compete with high-wage countries, and I believe we should. New jobs and clean energy, not only to fight climate change, which is a serious problem, but to create new opportunities and new businesses. I want us to do more to help small business. That's where 2/3 of the new jobs are going to come from. I want us to raise the national minimum wage because people who live in poverty should not, who work full time should not still be in poverty. And I sure do want to make sure women get equal pay for the work we do. I feel strongly that we have to have an education system that starts with preschool and goes through college. That's why I want more technical education in high schools and in community colleges, real apprenticeships to prepare young people for the jobs of the future. I want to make college debt-free, and for families making less than $125,000, you will not get a tuition bill from a public college or university if the plan that I worked on with Bernie Sanders is enacted. And we're going to work hard to make sure that it is, because we are going to go where the money is. Most of the gains in the last years since the Great Recession have gone to the very top. So we are going to have the wealthy pay their fair share. We're going to have corporations make a contribution greater than they are now to our country. That is a plan that has been analyzed by independent experts, which said that it could produce 10 million new jobs. By contrast, Donald's plan has been analyzed to conclude it might lose 3.5 million jobs. Why? Because his whole plan is to cut taxes, to give the biggest tax breaks ever to the wealthy and to corporations, adding $20 trillion to our debt and causing the kind of dislocation that we have seen before, because it truly will be trickle-down economics on steroids. So the plan I have, I think, will actually produce greater opportunities. The plan he has will cost us jobs and possibly lead to another Great Recession.
Secretary, thank you. Mr. Trump, why will your plan create more jobs and growth than Secretary Clinton?
Well, first of all, before I start on my plan, her plan is going to raise taxes and even double your taxes. Her tax plan is a disaster. And she can say all she wants about college tuition, and I'm a big proponent. We're going to do a lot of things for college tuition, but the rest of the public's going to be paying for it. We will have a massive, massive tax increase under Hillary Clinton's plan. But I'd like to start off where we left, because when I said Japan and Germany, and I'm not to single them out, but South Korea, these are very rich, powerful countries. Saudi Arabia, nothing but money. We protect Saudi Arabia. Why aren't they paying? She immediately, when she heard this, I questioned it. And I questioned NATO. Why aren't the NATO questioned? Why aren't they paying? Because they weren't paying. Since I did this was a year ago, all of a sudden they're paying. And I've been given a lot of credit for it. All of a sudden they're starting to pay up. They have to pay up. We're protecting people. They have to pay up. And I'm a big fan of NATO, but they have to pay up. She comes out and said, we love our allies. We think our allies are great. Well, it's awfully hard to get them to pay up when you have somebody saying, we think how great they are. We have to tell Japan in a very nice way. We have to tell Germany, all of these countries, South Korea, we have to say, you have to help us out. We have, during his regime, during President Obama's regime, we've doubled our national debt. We're up to $20 trillion. So my plan, we're going to renegotiate trade deals. We're going to have a lot of free trade. We're going to have free trade, more free trade than we have right now. But we have horrible deals. Our jobs are being taken out by the deal that her husband signed, NAFTA, one of the worst deals ever. Our jobs are being sucked out of our economy. You look at all of the places that I just left. You go to Pennsylvania, you go to Ohio, you go to Florida, you go to any of them. You go upstate New York. Our jobs have fled to Mexico and other places. We're bringing our jobs back. I am going to renegotiate NAFTA. And if I can't make a great deal, then we're going to terminate NAFTA and we're going to create new deals. We're going to have trade. But we're going to terminate it. We're going to make a great trade deal. And if we can't, we're going to do it. We're going to go a separate way, because it has been a disaster. We are going to cut taxes massively. We're going to cut business taxes massively. They're going to start hiring people. We're going to bring the $2.5 trillion that's offshore back into the country. We are going to start the engine rolling again, because right now our country is dying at 1% GDP.
Well, let me translate that if I can, Chris, because
you can't.
The fact is he's going to advocate for the largest tax cuts we've ever seen, 3 times more than the tax cuts under the Bush administration. I have said repeatedly throughout this campaign, I will not raise taxes on anyone making $250,000 or less. I also will not add a penny to the debt. I have costed out what I'm going to do. He will, through his massive tax cuts, add $20 trillion to the debt. Well, he mentioned the debt. We know how to get control of the debt. When my husband was president, we went from a $300 billion deficit to a $200 billion surplus, and we were actually on the path to eliminating the national debt. When President Obama came into office, he inherited the worst economic disaster since the Great Depression. He has cut the deficit by 2/3. So, yes, one of the ways you go after the debt, one of the ways you create jobs is by investing in people. So I do have investments in new jobs investments in education, skill training, and the opportunities for people to get ahead and stay ahead. That's the kind of approach
Secretary,
that will work. Cutting taxes on the wealthy, we've tried that.
Secretary,
it has not worked the way that it has been
Secretary
promised.
Clinton, I want to pursue your plan because in many ways it is similar to the Obama stimulus plan in 2009, which has led to the slowest GDP growth since 1949.
Correct.
Thank you, sir. You told me in July when we spoke that the problem is that President Obama didn't get to do enough in what he was trying to do with his stimulus. So is your plan basically even more of the Obama stimulus?
Well, it's a combination, Chris. And let me say that when you inherit the level of economic catastrophe that President Obama inherited, it was a real touch-and-go situation. I was in the Senate before I became Secretary of State. I've never seen people as physically distraught as the Bush administration team was because of what was happening to the economy. I personally believe that the steps that President Obama took saved the economy. He doesn't get the credit he deserves for taking some very hard positions. But it was a terrible recession. So now we've dug ourselves out of it. We're standing, but we're not yet running. So what I am proposing is that we invest from the middle out and the ground up, not the top down. That is not going to work. That's why what I have put forward doesn't add a penny to the debt, but it is the kind of approach that will enable more people to take those new jobs, higher paying jobs. We're beginning to see some increase in incomes, and we certainly have had a long string of increasing jobs. We've got to do more to get the whole economy moving, and that's what I believe I will be able to do.
Mr. Trump, even conservative economists who have looked at your plan say that the numbers don't add up, that your idea, and you've talked about 25 million jobs created, 4%
Over a 10-year period.
growth, is unrealistic. And they say, you talk a lot about growing the energy industry, they say with oil prices as low as they are right now, that's unrealistic as well. Your response?
So I just left some high representatives of India. They're growing at 8%. China is growing at 7%, and that for them is a catastrophically low number. We are growing. Our last report came out, and it's right around the 1% level, and I think it's going down. Last week, as you know, at the end of last week, they came out with an anemic jobs report, a terrible jobs report. In fact, I said, is that the last jobs report before the election? Because if it is, I should win easily. It was so bad. The report was so bad. Look, our country is stagnant. We've lost our jobs. We've lost our businesses. We're not making things anymore, relatively speaking. Our product is pouring in from China, pouring in from Vietnam, pouring in from all over the world. I've visited so many communities. This has been such an incredible education for me, Chris. I've gotten to know so many. I've developed so many friends over the last year, and they cry when they see what's happened. I passed factories that were thriving 20, 25 years ago, and because of the bill that her husband signed and she blessed 100%, it is just horrible what's happened to these people in these communities. Now, she can say that her husband did well, but boy, did they suffer as NAFTA kicked in, because it didn't really kick in very much, but it kicked in after they left. Boy, did they suffer. That was one of the worst things that's ever been signed by our country. Now she wants to sign Trans-Pacific Partnership, and she wants it. She lied when she said she didn't call it the gold standard in one of the debates. She totally lied. She did call it the gold standard, and they actually fact-checked, and they said I was right. I was so honored.
I want to give you a chance to briefly speak to that, and then I want to pivot to 1/6
And that
of the
will be as
economy,
bad as NAFTA.
which is Obamacare. But go ahead,
Well,
briefly.
First, let me say, number one, when I saw the final agreement for TPP, I said I was against it. It didn't meet my tests. I've had the same tests. Does it create jobs, raise incomes, and further our national security? I'm against it now. I'll be against it after the election. I'll be against it when I'm president. There's only one of us on this stage who's actually shipped jobs to Mexico, because that's Donald. He's shipped jobs to 12 countries, including Mexico. But he mentioned China. And, you know, one of the biggest problems we have with China is the illegal dumping of steel and aluminum into our markets. I have fought against that. as a senator, I've stood up against it as Secretary of State. Donald has bought Chinese steel and aluminum. In fact, the Trump hotel right here in Las Vegas was made with Chinese steel. So he goes around with crocodile tears about how terrible it is, but he has given jobs to Chinese steel workers, not American steel workers.
Mr. Trump?
That's the kind of approach that is just not going to work. We're going to pull the country together. We're going to have trade agreements that we enforce. That's why I'm going to have a trade prosecutor for the first time in history. And we're going to enforce those agreements. And we're going to look for businesses to help us by buying American products.
Go ahead,
I
Mr.
ask
Trump.
a simple question. She's been doing this for 30 years. Why the hell didn't you do it over the last 15, 20 years? You were very much involved. Excuse me, my turn. You were very much involved in every aspect of this country, very much. And you do have experience. I'd say the one thing you have over me is experience, but it's bad experience because what you've done has turned out badly. For 30 years, you've been in a position to help. And if you say that I use steel or I use something else, I make it impossible for me to do that. I wouldn't mind. The problem is you talk, but you don't get anything done, Hillary. You don't. Just like when you ran the State Department, $6 billion was missing. How do you miss $6 billion? You ran the State Department. $6 billion was either stolen, they don't know. It's gone. $6 billion. If you become president, this country is going to be in some mess, believe me.
Well, first of all, what he just said about the State Department is not only untrue, it's been debunked numerous times. But I think it's really an important issue. He raised the 30 years of experience. So let me just talk briefly about that. You know, back in the 1970s, I worked for the Children's Defense Fund, and I was taking on discrimination against African-American kids in schools. He was getting sued by the Justice Department for racial discrimination in his apartment buildings. In the 1980s, I was working to reform the schools in Arkansas. He was borrowing $14 million from his father to start his businesses. In the 1990s, I went to Beijing, and I said women's rights are human rights. He insulted a former Miss Universe, Alicia Machado, called her an eating machine. And on the day when I was in the Situation Room, monitoring the raid that brought Osama bin Laden to justice, he was hosting the Celebrity Apprentice. So I'm happy to compare my 30 years of experience, what I've done for this country, trying to help in every way I could, especially kids and families, get ahead and stay ahead, with your 30 years, and I'll let the American people make that decision.
Well, I think I did a much better job. I built a massive company, a great company, some of the greatest assets anywhere in the world. Worth many, many billions of dollars. I started with a $1 million loan. I agree with that. It's a $1 million loan, but I built a phenomenal company. And if we could run our country the way I've run my company, we would have a country that you would be so proud of. You would even be proud of it. And frankly, when you look at her real record, take a look at Syria, take a look at the migration, take a look at Libya, take a look at Iraq. She gave us ISIS because her and Obama created this huge vacuum. And a small group came out of that huge vacuum because we should have never been in Iraq, but once we were there, we should have never got out the way they wanted to get out. She gave us ISIS as sure as you are sitting there. And what happened is now ISIS is in 32 countries. And now I listen how she's going to get rid of ISIS. She's going to get rid of nobody.
All right, we are going to get to foreign hotspots in a few moments, but the next segment is fitness to be president of the United States. Mr. Trump, at the last debate, you said your talk about grabbing women was just that, talk, and that you'd never actually done it. And since then, as we all know, 9 women have come forward and said that you either groped them or kissed them without their consent. Why would so many different women from so many different circumstances over so many different years, why would they all in this last couple of weeks make up, you deny this, why would they all make up these stories? And since this is a question for both of you, Secretary Clinton, Mr. Trump says what your husband did and that you defended was even worse. Mr. Trump, you go first.
Well, first of all, those stories have been largely debunked. Those people, I don't know those people. I have a feeling how they came. I believe it was her campaign that did it. Just like if you look at what came out today on the clips where I was wondering what happened with my rally in Chicago and other rallies where we had such violence. She's the one in Obama that caused the violence. They hired people, they paid them $1,500, and they're on tape saying, be violent, cause fights, do bad things. I would say the only way, because those stories are all totally false. I have to say that. And I didn't even apologize to my wife, who's sitting right here, because I didn't do anything. I didn't know any of these women. I didn't see these women. These women, the woman on the plane, the woman, I think they want either fame or her campaign did it. And I think it's her campaign, because what I saw, what they did, which is a criminal act, by the way, where they're telling people to go out and start fistfights and start violence. And I'll tell you what, in particular in Chicago, people were hurt and people could have been killed in that riot. And that was now all on tape, started by her. I believe, Chris, that she got these people to step forward. If it wasn't, they get their 10 minutes of fame. But they were all totally, it was all fiction. It was lies and it was fiction.
Well,
Secretary Clinton.
at the last debate, we heard Donald talking about what he did to women. And after that, a number of women have come forward saying that's exactly what he did to them. Now, what was his response? Well, he held a number of big rallies where he said that he could not possibly have done those things to those women because they were not attractive enough for
I did not
them
say
to be
that.
assaulted.
I did not say that.
In fact, he went on to say,
Her 2 minutes, sir, her 2 minutes.
But did not say that.
It's her 2 minutes.
he went on to say, look at her. I don't think so. About another woman, he said, that wouldn't be my first choice. He attacked the woman reporter writing the story, called her disgusting, as he has called a number of women during this campaign. You know, Donald thinks belittling women makes him bigger. He goes after their dignity, their self-worth, and I don't think there is a woman anywhere who doesn't know what that feels like. So we now know what Donald thinks and what he says and how he acts toward women. That's who Donald is. I think it's really up to all of us to demonstrate who we are and who our country is, and to stand up and be very clear about what we expect from our next president, how we want to bring our country together, where we don't want to have the kind of pitting of people one against the other, where instead we celebrate our diversity, we lift people up, and we make our country even greater. America is great because America is good. And it really is up to all of us to make that true now and in the future, and particularly for our children and our grandchildren.
Mr. Trump.
Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody. Nobody has more respect.
Please, everybody.
And frankly, those stories have been largely debunked. And I really want to just talk about something slightly different. She mentions this, which is all fiction, all fictionalized, probably or possibly started by her and her very sleazy campaign. But I will tell you, what isn't fictionalized are her emails, where she destroyed 33,000 emails criminally, after getting a subpoena from the United States Congress. What happened to the FBI? I don't know. We have a great general, 4-star general, today, you read it in all the papers, going to potentially serve 5 years in jail for lying to the FBI. One lie. She's lied hundreds of times to the people, to Congress, and to the FBI. He's going to probably go to jail. This is a 4-star general, and she gets away with it, and she can run for the presidency of the United States. That's really what you should be talking about, not fiction where somebody wants fame or where they come out of her crooked campaign.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, every time Donald is pushed on something which is obviously uncomfortable, like what these women are saying, he immediately goes to denying responsibility. And it's not just about women. He never apologizes or says he's sorry for anything. So we know what he has said and what he's done to women. But he also went after a disabled reporter, mocked and mimicked him on national television. He went after Mr. and Mrs. Khan, the parents of a young man who died serving our country, a Gold Star family because of their religion. He went after John McCain, a prisoner of war, said he prefers people who aren't captured. He went after a federal judge, born in Indiana, but who Donald said couldn't be trusted to try the fraud and racketeering case against Trump University because his parents were Mexican. So it's not one thing. This is a pattern of divisiveness, of a very dark and in many ways dangerous vision of our country, where he incites violence, where he applauds people who are pushing and pulling and punching at his rallies. That is not who America is. And I hope that as we move in the last weeks of this campaign, more and more people will understand what's at stake in this election. It really does come down to what kind of country we are going to have.
So sad when she talks about violence at my rallies, and she caused the violence. It's on tape.
During the last...
The other things are false, but honestly, I'd love to talk about getting rid of ISIS, and I'd love to talk about other things.
Okay.
But those other charges, as she knows, are false.
In this bucket about fitness to be president, there's been a lot of developments over the last 10 days since the last debate. I'd like to ask you about them. These are questions that the American people have. Secretary Clinton, during your 2009 Senate confirmation hearing, you promised to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest with your dealing with the Clinton Foundation while you were Secretary of State. But emails show that donors got special access to you. Those seeking grants for Haiti relief were considered separately from non-donors, and some of those donors got government contracts, taxpayer money. Can you really say that you kept your pledge to that Senate committee? And why isn't what happened and what went on between you and the Clinton Foundation, why isn't it what Mr. Trump calls pay to play?
Well, everything I did as Secretary of State was in furtherance of our country's interests and our values. The State Department has said that. I think that's been proven. But I am happy. In fact, I'm thrilled to talk about the Clinton Foundation because it is a world-renowned charity. And I am so proud of the work that it does. You know, I could talk for the rest of the debate. I know I don't have the time to do that. But just briefly, the Clinton Foundation made it possible for 11 million people around the world with HIV/AIDS to afford treatment. And that's about half of all the people in the world who are getting treatment. In partnership with the American Health Association, we have made environments in schools healthier for kids,
Secretary
including
Clinton,
healthier
respectfully, this is an open discussion.
Well, it is an open discussion.
I understand, and the specific question went to pay for play. Do you want to talk about that?
But there is no evidence, but there is a lot of evidence about the very good work
and it's a criminal enterprise,
that
and
the
so many people know
Clinton
it.
Foundation
It's a
have gotten
criminal
for their work.
enterprise. Saudi Arabia giving $25 million, Qatar, all of these countries. You talk about women and women's rights. So these are people that push gays off buildings. These are people that kill women and treat women horribly, and yet you take their money. So I'd like to ask you right now, why don't you give back the money that you've taken from certain countries that treat certain groups of people so horribly? Why don't you give back the money? I think it would be a great gesture. Because she takes a tremendous amount of money, and you take a look at the people of Haiti. I was at a little Haiti the other day in Florida, and I want to tell you, they hate the Clintons because what's happened in Haiti with the Clinton Foundation is a disgrace. And you know it, and they know it, and everybody knows
Secretary
it.
Clinton.
Very quickly, we at the Clinton Foundation spend 90% of all the money that is donated on behalf of programs of people around the world and in our own country. I'm very proud of that. We have the highest rating from the watchdogs that follow foundations. And I'd be happy to compare what we do with the Trump Foundation, which took money from other people and bought a 6-foot portrait of Donald. I mean, who does that? It just was astonishing. But when it comes to Haiti, Haiti is the poorest country in our hemisphere. The earthquake and the hurricanes, it has devastated Haiti. Bill and I have been involved in trying to help Haiti for many years. The Clinton Foundation raised $30 million to help Haiti after the catastrophic earthquake and all of the terrible problems the people there had. We've done things to help small businesses, agriculture, and so much else. And we're going to keep working to help Haiti because it's an important part of the American
They don't want you to help them anymore. I'd like to mention one thing. Trump Foundation, small foundation. People contribute. I contribute. The money goes 100% goes to different charities, including a lot of military. I don't get anything. I don't buy boats. I don't buy planes. What happens is the money goes out.
Wasn't some of the money used to settle your lawsuit, sir?
No, it was. We put up the American flag, and that's it. They put up the American flag. We fought for the right in Palm Beach to put up the American flag.
There was a penalty that was imposed by Palm Beach County, and the money came from your foundation.
And by the way, the money went to Fisher House, where they build houses. The money that you're talking about went to Fisher House, where they build houses for veterans and disabled.
I want to get into one last...
But of course, there's no way we can know whether any of that is true because he hasn't released his tax returns. He is the first candidate ever to run for president in the last 40-plus years who has not released his tax returns. So everything he says about charity or anything else, we can't prove it. You can look at our tax returns. We've got them all out there. But what is really troubling is that we learned in the last debate he has not paid a penny in federal income tax. And we were talking about immigrants a few minutes ago, Chris. You know, half of all immigrants, undocumented immigrants in our country, actually pay federal income tax. So we have undocumented immigrants in America who are paying more federal income tax than a billionaire. I find that
let me just tell you very
astonishing.
Simply, we're entitled, because of the laws that people like her pass, to take massive amounts of depreciation and other charges, and we do it. And all of her donors, just about all of them, I know Buffett took hundreds of millions of dollars, George Soros, took hundreds of millions of dollars. Let me just explain. All of her donors, most of her donors have done the same thing as I did.
Okay.
And you know what you should have done?
Folks, we heard
and
this.
You know, Hillary, what you should have done? You should have changed the law when you were a United States Senator. If you don't like it.
This.
Yeah.
Because your donors and your special interests are doing the same thing as I do, except even more so.
Well,
you should have changed the law, but you won't change the law because you take in so much money. I mean, I sat in my apartment today on a very beautiful hotel down the street, known as Trump.
Made with Chinese steel.
But I will tell you, I sat there watching ad after ad after ad, false ad, all paid for by your friends on Wall Street that gave so much money because they know you're going to protect them. And frankly, you should have changed the laws. If you don't like what I did, you should have changed the laws.
Mr. Trump, I want to ask you about one last question in this topic. You have been warning at rallies recently that this election is rigged and that Hillary Clinton is in the process of trying to steal it from you. Your running mate, Governor Pence, pledged on Sunday that he and you, his words, will absolutely accept the result of this election. Today, your daughter Ivanka said the same thing. I want to ask you here on the stage tonight, do you make the same commitment that you will absolutely, sir, that you will absolutely accept the result of this election?
I will look at it at the time. I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time. What I've seen is so bad. First of all, the media is so dishonest and so corrupt, and the pile-on is so amazing. The New York Times actually wrote an article about it that they don't even care. It's so dishonest, and they've poisoned the minds of the voters. But unfortunately for them, I think the voters are seeing through it. I think they're going to see through it. We'll find out on November 8th, but I think they're going to see through it.
But, sir, there's
you look, excuse me, Chris, if you look at your voter rolls, you will see millions of people that are registered to vote. Millions. This isn't coming from me. This is coming from Pew Report and other places. Millions of people that are registered to vote that shouldn't be registered to vote. So let me just give you one other thing. So I talk about the corrupt media. I talk about the millions of people. Tell you one other thing. She shouldn't be allowed to run. She's guilty of a very, very serious crime. She should not be allowed to run. And just in that respect, I say it's rigged because she should never, Chris, she should never have been allowed to run for the presidency based on what she did with emails and so many other things.
But, sir, there is a tradition in this country. In fact, one of the prides of this country is the peaceful transition of power, and that no matter how hard fought a campaign is, that at the end of the campaign, that the loser concedes to the winner. Not saying that you're necessarily going to be the loser or the winner, but that the loser concedes to the winner and that the country comes together in part for the good of the country. Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Well,
okay?
Chris, let me respond to that because that's horrifying. You know, every time Donald thinks things are not going in his direction, he claims whatever it is rigged against him. The FBI conducted a year-long investigation into my emails. They concluded there was no case. He said the FBI was rigged. He lost the Iowa caucus. He lost the Wisconsin primary. He said the Republican primary was rigged against him. Then Trump University gets sued for fraud and racketeering. He claims the court system and the federal judge is rigged against him. There was even a time when he didn't get an Emmy for his TV program 3 years in a row, and he started tweeting that the Emmys were rigged against him.
Should have gotten it.
This is a mindset. This is how Donald thinks. And it's funny, but it's also really troubling.
Okay.
Now, that is not the way our democracy works. We've been around for 240 years. We've had free and fair elections. We've accepted the outcomes when we may not have liked them. And that is what must be expected of anyone standing on a debate stage during a general election. You know, President Obama said the other day, when you're whining before the game is even finished, it just shows you're not up to doing the job. And let's be clear about what he is saying and what that means. He is denigrating, he's talking down our democracy. And I, for one, am appalled that somebody who is the nominee of one of our two major parties would take that kind of position.
I think what the FBI did and what the Department of Justice did, including meeting with her husband, the Attorney General, on the back of an airplane on the tarmac in Arizona, I think it's disgraceful. I think it's a disgrace.
All right.
I think we've never had a situation so bad.
Hold on, folks. This doesn't do any good for anyone. Let's please continue the debate, and let's move on to the subject of foreign hotspots. The Iraqi offensive to take back Mosul has begun. If they are successful in pushing ISIS out of that city and out of all of Iraq, the question then becomes, what happens the day after? And that's something that whoever of you ends up as president is going to have to confront. Will you put U.S. troops into that vacuum to make sure that ISIS doesn't come back or isn't replaced by something even worse? Secretary Clinton, you go first in this segment. You have 2 minutes.
Well, I am encouraged that there is an effort led by the Iraqi army, supported by Kurdish forces, and also given the help and advice from the number of special forces and other Americans on the ground. But I will not support putting American soldiers into Iraq as an occupying force. I don't think that is in our interests, and I don't think that would be smart to do. In fact, Chris, I think that would be a big red flag waving for ISIS to reconstitute itself. The goal here is to take back Mosul. It's going to be a hard fight. I've got no illusions about that. And then continue to press into Syria to begin to take back and move on Raqqa, which is the ISIS headquarters. I am hopeful that the hard work that American military advisors have done will pay off, and that we will see a really successful military operation. But we know we've got lots of work to do. Syria will remain a hotbed of terrorism as long as the civil war, aided and abetted by the Iranians and the Russians, continue. So I have said, look, we need to keep our eye on ISIS. That's why I want to have an intelligence surge that protects us here at home, why we have to go after them from the air, on the ground, online, why we have to make sure here at home we don't let terrorists buy weapons. If you're too dangerous to fly, you're too dangerous to buy a gun. And I'm going to continue to push for a no-fly zone and safe havens within Syria, not only to help protect the Syrians and prevent the constant outflow of refugees, but to frankly gain some leverage on both the Syrian government and the Russians so that perhaps we can have the kind of serious negotiation necessary to bring the conflict to an end and go forward on a political track.
Mr. Trump, same question. If we are able to push ISIS out of Mosul and out of Iraq, would you be willing to put U.S. troops in there to prevent their return or something else?
Let me tell you, Mosul's so sad. We had Mosul. But when she left, when she took everybody out, we lost Mosul. Now we're fighting again to get Mosul. The problem with Mosul and what they wanted to do is they wanted to get the leaders of ISIS who they felt were in Mosul. About 3 months ago, I started reading that they want to get the leaders and they're going to attack Mosul. Whatever happened to the element of surprise? Okay? We announced we're going after Mosul. I've been reading about going after Mosul now for about, how long is it, Hillary? 3 months? These people have all left. They've all left. The element of surprise. Douglas MacArthur, George Patton, spinning in their graves when they see the stupidity of our country. So we're now fighting for Mosul that we had. All she had to do is stay there. Now we're going in to get it. But you know who the big winner in Mosul is going to be after we eventually get it? And the only reason they did it is because she's running for the office of president. And they want to look tough. They want to look good. He violated the red line in the sand. And he made so many mistakes, made all mistakes. That's why we have the Great Migration. But she wanted to look good for the election. So they're going in. But who's going to get Mosul, really? We'll take Mosul eventually. By the way, if you look at what's happening, much tougher than they thought. Much, much tougher, much more dangerous, going to be more deaths than they thought. But the leaders that we wanted to get are all gone because they're smart. They say, what do we need this for? So Mosul is going to be a wonderful thing, and Iran should write us a letter of thank you, just like the really stupid, the stupidest deal of all time. A deal that's going to give Iran absolutely nuclear weapons. Iran should write us yet another letter saying thank you very much. Because Iran, as I said many years ago, Iran is taking over Iraq, something they've wanted to do forever, but we've made it so easy for them. So we're now going to take Mosul, and you know who's going to be the beneficiary? Iran. Boy, are they making, I mean, they are outsmarting. Look, you're not there. You might be involved in that decision, but you were there when you took everybody out of Mosul and out of Iraq. You shouldn't have been in Iraq, but you did vote for it. You shouldn't have been in Iraq, but once you were in Iraq, you should have never left the way. The point is, the big winner is going to be Iran.
Well, you know, once again, Donald is implying that he didn't support the invasion of Iraq. I said it was a mistake. I've said that years ago. He has consistently denied what is a very clear fact, that before the invasion, he supported it. And, you know, I just want everybody to go Google it. Google Donald Trump, Iraq, and you will see the dozens of sources which verify that he was for the invasion of Iraq. And you can actually hear the audio of him saying that. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters because he has not told the truth about that position. I guess he believes it makes him look better now, to contrast with me, because I did vote for it. But what's really important here is to understand all the interplay. Mosul is a Sunni city. Mosul is on the border of Syria. And yes, we do need to go after Baghdadi, and just like we went after bin Laden while you were doing Celebrity Apprentice, and we brought him to justice. We need to go after the leadership, but we need to get rid of them, get rid of their fighters. They're estimated several thousand fighters in Mosul. They've been digging underground. They've been prepared to defend. It's going to be tough fighting, but I think we can take back Mosul, and then we can move on into Syria and take back Raqqa. This is what we have to do. I'm just amazed that he seems to think that the Iraqi government and our allies and everybody else launched the attack on Mosul to help me in this election. But that's how Donald thinks, you know. He always is looking for some
Chris, we don't gain anything.
He has all the
Iran is taking over Iraq.
Secretary Clinton.
Iran is taking over Iraq. We don't gain
Secretary Clinton.
We would have gained if they did it by surprise.
Wait. Secretary Clinton, it's an open discussion.
Secretary. We would have gained if they did it by surprise.
Secretary, please let Mr. Trump speak.
He's unfit, and he proves it every time
you
he
are
talks.
the one that's unfit. You know, WikiLeaks just actually came out. John Podesta said some horrible things about you, and boy, was he right. He said some beauties. And, you know, Bernie Sanders, he said you have bad judgment. You do. And if you think that going into Mosul, after we let the world know we're going in, and all of the people that we really wanted, the leaders, they're all gone. If you think that was good, then you do. Now, John Podesta said you have terrible instincts. Bernie Sanders said you have bad judgment. I agree with both.
Well, you should ask Bernie Sanders who he's supporting for president, and he has said,
Which is
as
a
he
big
has
mistake.
campaigned for me around the country, you are the most dangerous person to run for president in the modern history of America. I think he's right.
Let's turn to Aleppo. Mr. Trump, in the last debate, you were both asked about the situation in the Syrian city of Aleppo, and I want to follow up on that because you said several things in that debate which were not true, sir. You said that Aleppo has basically fallen. In fact, there are.
It's a catastrophe.
It is a catastrophe, but there are a quarter.
Have you seen it? Have you seen it?
Sir,
have you seen what's happened to Aleppo?
If I might finish my question.
Okay, so it hasn't fallen. Take a look at it.
Well, there are 250,000 people still living there and being slaughtered.
That's right.
You also
and they are being slaughtered
Yes.
because of bad decisions.
If I may just finish here. And you also said that that Syria and Russia are busy fighting ISIS. In fact, they have been the ones who've been bombing and shelling eastern Aleppo, and they just announced a humanitarian pause, in effect admitting that they have been bombing and shelling Aleppo. Would you like to clear that up, sir?
Well, Aleppo is a disaster. It's a humanitarian nightmare, but it has fallen from any standpoint. I mean, what do you need, a signed document? Take a look at Aleppo. It is so sad when you see what's happened. And a lot of this is because of Hillary Clinton, because what's happened is by fighting Assad, who turned out to be a lot tougher than she thought, and now she's going to say, oh, he loves Assad. He's just much tougher and much smarter than her and Obama. And everyone thought he was gone 2 years ago, 3 years ago. He aligned with Russia. He now also aligned with Iran, who we made very powerful. We gave them $150 billion back. We give them $1.7 billion in cash. I mean, cash, bundles of cash as big as this stage. We gave them $1.7 billion. Now, they have aligned. He has aligned with Russia and with Iran. They don't want ISIS, but they have other things because we're backing rebels. We don't know who the rebels are. We're giving them lots of money, lots of everything. We don't know who the rebels are. And when and if, and it's not going to happen because you have Russia and you have Iran now, but if they ever did overthrow Assad, you might end up with as bad as Assad is, and he's a bad guy. But you may very well end up with worse than Assad. If she did nothing, we'd be in much better shape. And this is what's caused the Great Migration, where she's taken in tens of thousands of Syrian refugees who probably, in many cases, not probably, who are definitely, in many cases, ISIS aligned. And we now have them in our country. And wait till you see, this is going to be the great Trojan horse. And wait till you see what happens in the coming years. Lots of luck, Hillary. Thanks a lot for doing a great job.
Secretary Clinton, you have talked about, and in the last debate and again today, that you would impose a no-fly zone to try to protect the people of Aleppo and to stop the killing there. President Obama has refused to do that because he fears it's going to draw us closer or deeper into the conflict. And General Joseph Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, says, you impose a no-fly zone, chances are you're going to get into a war, his words, with Syria and Russia. So the question I have is, if you impose a no-fly zone, first of all, how do you respond to their concerns? Secondly, if you impose a no-fly zone and a Russian plane violates that, does President Clinton shoot that plane down?
Well, Chris, first of all, I think a no-fly zone could save lives and could hasten the end of the conflict. I am well aware of the really legitimate concerns that you have expressed from both the president and the general. This would not be done just on the first day. This would take a lot of negotiation. It would also take making it clear to the Russians and the Syrians that our purpose here was to provide safe zones on the ground. We've had millions of people leave Syria, and those millions of people inside Syria who've been dislocated. So I think we could strike a deal and make it very clear to the Russians and the Syrians that this was something that we believed was in the best interests of the people on the ground in Syria. It would help us with our fight against ISIS. But I want to respond to what Donald said about refugees. He's made these claims repeatedly. I am not going to let anyone into this country who is not vetted, who we do not have confidence in, but I am not going to slam the door on women and children. That picture of that little 4-year-old boy in Aleppo with the blood coming down his face while he sat in an ambulance is haunting. And so we are going to do very careful, thorough vetting. That does not solve our internal challenges with ISIS and our need to stop radicalization, to work with American Muslim communities who are on the front lines to identify and prevent attacks. In fact, the killer of the dozens of people at the nightclub in Orlando, the Pulse nightclub, was born in Queens, the same place Donald was born. So let's be clear about what the threat is and how we are best going to be able to meet it. And yes, some of that threat emanates from over in Syria and Iraq, and we've got to keep fighting, and I will defeat ISIS. And some of it is we have to up our game and be much smarter here
Folks,
at home.
I want to get into our final segment.
But I just have to, it's
Real
so
quick.
ridiculous she will defeat ISIS. We should have never let ISIS happen in the first place. And right now they're in 32 countries.
Okay.
You should have never. Wait 1 second. They had a ceasefire 3 weeks ago. A ceasefire, United States, Russia, Syria. And during the ceasefire, Russia took over vast swatches of land. And then they said, we don't want the ceasefire anymore. We are so outplayed on missiles, on ceasefires. They are outplayed. Now, she wasn't there. I assume she had nothing to do with it. But our country is so outplayed by Putin and Assad and, by the way, and by Iran. Nobody can believe how stupid our leadership is.
Mr. Trump, Secretary Clinton, no, we need to move on to our final segment, and that is the national debt, which has not been discussed until tonight. Our national debt as a share of the economy, our GDP, is now 77%. That's the highest since just after World War II. But the nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget says, Secretary Clinton, under your plan, debt would rise to 86% of GDP over the next 10 years. Mr. Trump, under your plan, they say it would rise to 105% of GDP over the next 10 years. Question is, why are both of you ignoring this problem? Mr. Trump, you go first.
Well, I say they're wrong because I'm going to create tremendous jobs. And we're bringing GDP from really 1%, which is what it is now. And if she got in, it'll be less than zero. But we're bringing it from 1% up to 4%. And I actually think we can go higher than 4%. I think you can go to 5 or 6%. And if we do, you don't have to bother asking your question because we have a tremendous machine. We will have created a tremendous economic machine once again. To do that, we're taking back jobs. We're not going to let our companies be raided by other countries where we lose all our jobs. We don't make our product anymore. It's very sad. But I'm going to create the kind of a country that we were from the standpoint of industry. We used to be there. We've given it up. We've become very, very sloppy. We've had people that are political hacks making the biggest deals in the world, bigger than companies. You take these big companies, these trade deals are far bigger than these companies. And yet we don't use our great leaders, many of whom back me and many of whom back Hillary, I must say. But we don't use those people. Those are the people, these are the greatest negotiators in the world. We have the greatest business people in the world. We have to use them to negotiate our trade deals. We use political hacks. We use people that get the position because they made a campaign contribution. And they're dealing with China and people that are very much smarter than they are. So we have to use our great people. But with that being said, we will create an economic machine, the likes of which we haven't seen in many decades. And people, Chris, will again go back to work and they'll make a lot of money and we'll have companies that will grow and expand and start from new.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, first, when I hear Donald talk like that and know that his slogan is "Make America Great Again," I wonder when he thought America was great. And before he rushes and says, you know, before you and President Obama were there, I think it's important to recognize that he has been criticizing our government for decades. You know, back in 1987, he took out a $100,000 ad in the New York Times during the time when President Reagan was president, and basically said exactly what he just said now, that we were the laughing stock of the world. He was criticizing President Reagan. This is the way Donald thinks about himself, puts himself into, the middle and says, I alone can fix it, as he said on the convention stage. But if you look at the debt, which is the issue you asked about, Chris, I pay for everything I'm proposing. I do not add a penny to the national debt. I take that very seriously because I do think it's one of the issues we've got to come to grips with. So when I talk about how we're going to pay for education, how we're going to invest in infrastructure, how we're going to get the cost of prescription drugs down, and a lot of the other issues that people talk to me about all the time, I've made it very clear we are going where the money is. We are going to ask the wealthy and corporations to pay their fair share. And there is no evidence whatsoever that that will slow down or diminish our growth. In fact, I think just the opposite. We'll have what economists call middle-out growth. We've got to get back to rebuilding the middle class, the families of America. That's where growth will come from. That's why I want to invest in you. I want to invest in your family. And I think that's the smartest way to grow the economy, to make the economy fairer. And we just have a big disagreement about this. It may be because of our experiences. He started off with his dad as a millionaire. I started off with my dad as a small businessman.
We've heard this before.
I think it's, it's a difference that affects how we see the world and what we want to do with the economy.
Time.
Thank you, Hillary. Could I just respond?
Well, no.
Because
sir,
I did
we're running out of
disagree with
time.
Ronald Reagan very strongly on trade. I disagreed with him. We should have been much tougher on trade even then. I've been waiting for years. Nobody does it right. And frankly, now we're going to do it right.
All right. The one last area I want to get into with you in this debate is the fact that the biggest driver of our debt is entitlements, which is 60% of all federal spending. Now, the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget has looked at both of your plans, and they say neither of you has a serious plan that is going to solve the fact that Medicare is going to run out of money in the 2020s, Social Security is going to run out of money in the 2030s, and at that time, recipients are going to take huge cuts in their benefits. So, in effect, the final question I want to ask you in this regard is, and let me start with you, Mr. Trump, would President Trump make a deal to save Medicare and Social Security that included both tax increases and benefit cuts, in effect, a grand bargain on entitlements?
I'm cutting taxes. We're going to grow the economy. It's going to grow at a record rate.
But that's not going to help on entitlements.
It's going to totally help you. And one thing we have to do, repeal and replace the disaster known as Obamacare. It's destroying our country. It's destroying our businesses, our small business, and our big businesses. We have to repeal and replace Obamacare. You take a look at the kind of numbers that will cost us in the year 17. It is a disaster if we don't repeal and replace. Now, it's probably going to die of its own weight, but Obamacare has to go. The premiums are going up 60, 70, 80%. Next year, they're going to go up over 100%. And I'm really glad that the premiums have started. At least the people see what's happening, because she wants to keep Obamacare and she wants to make it even worse. And it can't get any worse. Bad health care at the most expensive price. We have to repeal and replace Obamacare.
And Secretary Clinton, same question, because at this point, Social Security and Medicare are going to run out. The trust funds are going to run out of money. Will you, as president, will you consider a grand bargain, a deal that includes both tax increases and benefit cuts to try to save both programs?
Well, Chris, I am on record as saying that we need to put more money into the Social Security Trust Fund. That's part of my commitment to raise taxes on the wealthy. My Social Security payroll contribution will go up, as will Donald's, assuming he can't figure out how to get out of it. But what we want to do is to replenish the Social Security Trust Fund by making sure that we have sufficient resources. And that will come from either raising the cap and or finding other ways to get more money into it. I will not cut benefits. I want to enhance benefits for low-income workers and for women who have been disadvantaged by the current Social Security system. But what Donald is proposing with these massive tax cuts will result in a $20 trillion additional national debt. That will have dire consequences for Social Security and Medicare. And I'll say something about the Affordable Care Act, which he wants to repeal. The Affordable Care Act extended the solvency of the Medicare Trust Fund. So if he repeals it, our Medicare problem gets worse. What we need to do is go
Your
after
husband disagrees
the
with you.
long-term health care drivers. We've got to get costs down, increase value, emphasize wellness. I have a plan for doing that, and I think that we will be able to get entitlement spending under control with more resources and smarter decisions.
This is the final time, probably to both of your delight, that you're going to be on the stage together in this campaign. I would like to end it on a positive note. You had not agreed to closing statements, but it seems to me in a funny way that might make it more interesting because you haven't prepared closing statements. So I'd like you each to take it. We're going to put a clock up, a minute, as the final question in the final debate to tell the American people why they should elect you to be the next president. This is another new mini segment. Secretary Clinton, it's your turn to go first.
Well, I would like to say to everyone watching tonight that I'm reaching out to all Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, because we need everybody to help make our country what it should be, to grow the economy, to make it fairer, to make it work for everyone. We need your talents, your skills, your commitment, your energy, your ambition. You know, I've been privileged to see the presidency up close, and I know the awesome responsibility of protecting our country and the incredible opportunity of working to try to make life better for all of you. I have made the cause of children and families really my life's work. That's what my mission will be in the presidency. I will stand up for families against powerful interests, against corporations. I will do everything that I can to make sure that you have good jobs with rising incomes, that your kids have good educations from preschool through college. I hope you will give me a chance to serve as your president.
Secretary Clinton, thank you. Mr. Trump?
She's raising the money from the people she wants to control. It doesn't work that way. But when I started this campaign, I started it very strongly. It's called Make America Great Again. We're going to make America great. We have a depleted military. It has to be helped, has to be fixed. We have the greatest people on earth in our military. We don't take care of our veterans. We take care of illegal immigrants, people that come into the country illegally, better than we take care of our vets. That can't happen. Our policemen and women are disrespected. We need law and order, but we need justice too. Our inner cities are a disaster. You get shot walking to the store. They have no education. They have no jobs. I will do more for African Americans and Latinos than she can ever do in 10 lifetimes. All she's done is talk to the African Americans and to the Latinos. But they get the vote, and then they come back. They say, we'll see you in 4 years. We are going to make America strong again, and we are going to make America great again, and it has to start now. We cannot take 4 more years of Barack Obama, and that's what you get when you get her.
Thank you both. Secretary Clinton, hold on just a moment, folks. Secretary Clinton, Mr. Trump, I want to thank you both for participating in all 3 of these debates. That brings to an end this year's debate sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates. We want to thank the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and its students for having us. Now the decision is up to you. While millions have already voted, Election Day, November 8th, is just 20 days away. One thing everyone here can agree on, we hope you will go vote. It is one of the honors and obligations of living in this great country. Thank you, and good night.
All right, let's see if they go ahead and shake hands with each other. It looks like she's walking over to the moderator, Chris Wallace, shaking his hand. Let's see if they actually go ahead and shake hands right now. Not necessarily going to happen. A very, very contentious debate, some of the most important issues facing the country right now. But Jake Tapper, clearly the headline, Donald Trump saying he may not accept the result of this presidential election.
One of the most stunning things I've ever heard in a presidential debate ever. And while I think it's fair to say that he had some decent moments in there, especially when he was criticizing Obama and Clinton on foreign policy, the big hurdle for Donald Trump was, will he show the country that he has the temperament, that he has what it takes, that he has the fitness to be president. And to suggest that he might not accept the results of the election that we're about to hold in fewer than 3 weeks was staggering. And I don't think it helped him when it comes to showing the American people that he does have that temperament. The one thing I was looking for in this debate is, would he do anything to turn around the momentum? All the college-educated whites that are going to Hillary Clinton, all the women that are going to Hillary Clinton, all the minorities that are going to Hillary Clinton. No, I don't think he did anything to turn that around. Yes, he had some good moments, especially when it came to criticisms of her and her policies and President Obama's policies. But to suggest that he is not going to necessarily accept the results of the nomination, that was a disastrous answer.
Yeah, it was truly extraordinary. I've never heard anything like that. Dana Bash, his vice presidential running mate, said that they, of course, would accept the result, the voice of the American people. His daughter said the same thing. He refused to say that. He said, I want to keep you in suspense.
Not only did his running mate say that, he said that to us in that very debate hall about an hour before Donald Trump took the stage. So it really goes to show that Donald Trump, no matter how much he prepared, and we do understand he prepared very well, and for the most part, as Jake said, I agree with you, Jake, that for the most part during this debate, that came through, that he was a much more disciplined Donald Trump. And I think at the end of the day, before that comment happened, it looked like it was a wash. That she did well, that he did well, that it wasn't really clear if anybody was going to benefit or not until that moment when he was asked something very basic, something that my understanding is that he was certainly prepared for, and he didn't answer it affirmatively. And more importantly, she was prepared for it. She had all of her opposition research ready to go about the times where he called other systems rigged, even the Emmys when he didn't win an Emmy. Wolf.
She clearly was ready for that. John King, did either one of them move the needle tonight?
Not in a significant way, I don't think. If you remember, talk about this where we come in. Hillary Clinton has a significant advantage in our electoral map, over 300 electoral votes. We have her at 307. Donald Trump in the 170s, well short of the 270 you need to win. So you think, okay, 19 days left. Did he have with the biggest audience they're going to get before Election Day? Did he do anything to move the dial in the way he needs to move it? He needs to bend steel to change this election. Right now, we've taken Utah away from him and Arizona to make them toss-up states. At the beginning, when he was talking about judges, when he was talking about guns, when he was talking about abortion, at the top of the debate, very base-driven to the Republicans, it is possible he boosted his support among Republicans with those answers. But to the point Jake and Dana are making, I was getting emails from Republicans in the key swing states, in New Hampshire, in Ohio, and Florida. In all three states, the reactions are essentially, I'm going to say, oh my God. They were not that polite when Donald Trump refused to say he would accept the results of the election. They think that a man who had such a good gut for Republicans during the primary does not have a gut that middle America wants him to respect the process.
And one other thing that I thought was a really important moment. Chris Wallace asked Donald Trump about the allegations of sexual assault and sexual attention that was not wanted, and put a tough question to Hillary Clinton about, he says, what your husband, Bill Clinton, has done is even worse. Donald Trump attacked the women that have accused him, suggested that they were liars and put up to it by the Clinton campaign. Hillary Clinton gave a very passionate speech that was speaking to all women. All women know what it's like to be belittled like this. Completely dodged the question about Bill Clinton. Back to Trump, he's defending himself again. He's not even pointing out that Hillary Clinton, who gave this very passionate speech with this really uncomfortable asterisk there, which is, how can you say that when these allegations have been made against your husband? And he just whiffed it. He just completely let it go because he is so focused on defending himself, he couldn't even see clearly to then prosecute Hillary Clinton on what I thought was probably her strongest moment.
I also think at that point of the debate, she was under his skin a little bit. The first 45 minutes, he was much more restrained. He was making his conservative points, but slowly, and she just methodically kept coming back, the loan from your father, some of these other things. And a couple of the tough questions from Chris Wallace also, I think, got under Donald Trump. If we notice in the past debates, and even in the Republican debates, there are certain things that set him off. And once he gets a little prickly about those things, then I think it's harder for him to remember the points he was trying to make in debate prep.
Another moment I thought that was, I'm sorry, Wolf, just one last point. Another moment I thought was really bad for him came at the very end, and maybe people didn't notice it, but I think a lot of women probably noticed it, when she was answering a question, and it was all within the confines of this very contentious debate, and all of a sudden he said, she's a nasty woman. She's a nasty woman. Now, they had been going after each other in a very tough way, both saying that they were unfit, etc. But that was a very personal attack. And I think this debate ultimately is going to hurt them with women voters.
Reinforces a weakness.
Yeah.
A very, very contentious debate. But Anderson, Dana Bash, you got a guest over there.
That's right. Well, if I have Kellyanne Conway, Mr. Trump's campaign manager, first question I have to ask you is, frankly, what we've all been talking about is Donald Trump saying the opposite of what you and his daughter have said in the past 24 hours about whether or not he will accept the results of this election. Are you disappointed in his answer?
I'm not disappointed in a thing tonight. I thought it was an amazing debate, and Donald Trump will accept the results of the election because he's going to win the election, so they'll be easy to accept. He won the debate tonight. Amazing performance. Getting back to all those core issues that really catapulted his campaign from the beginning, Dana: jobs, trade, immigration, the failed foreign policy.
You just told me that he will accept the results. Why wouldn't he say that on the debate stage?
Do you remember 2000 when Al Gore contested the election? I mean, when he actually retracted his concession to George W. Bush. He had called him in Austin.
But that's an extraordinary experience.
Right. So we have extraordinary experiences, but you have to listen to everything he said. In fairness, he's talking about a rigged, corrupt system. Many Americans agree with that. He's talking about a system where people feel like insiders, like Hillary Clinton and their moneyed cohorts, get all the benefits, on top of the fact that many in the media collude with them, conspire with them. 96% of the donations from working journalists went to Hillary Clinton.
I just want to just to put a button on this. No. I'm going to ask you another question.
I heard a lot.
What you just said to me was that he will accept. So what you're telling me is that on election night, if he's sort of waffling, you as his campaign manager will say, Mr. Trump, no matter what it is, I mean, obviously it won't be a big deal if he wins, but if he doesn't, you will say, Mr. Trump, this is what is going to happen, and you're going to accept these results.
Absent evidence of widespread abuse and irregularities, yes, I would say that, but I actually think I'll be saying to him, congratulations, Mr. President, and I'll see you there in 2 weeks.
He also, Kellyanne, back to you, Anderson.
All right, Dana, thanks very much. We'll see who else comes into the spin room, aptly named indeed. Gloria, David Axelrod, have you ever heard a presidential candidate say?
Watching Kellyanne walk away reminds me of a bad debate I was once involved in. And the worst thing in the world is going into a spin room and trying to persuade people that the disaster they just watched was actually a triumph. This was a disaster for Donald Trump. He started off temperamentally. I thought, well, this is, I was going to apologize to Jeffrey because I was going to say he can surprise us. And I was surprised because temperamentally, as the debate began, it looked as if he was going to take a different approach. He did articulate starkly conservative positions on guns, on immigration, on choice. That will go to his base, probably not to the swing voter, not to the women he needs to get. But he was composed. He wasn't interrupting. Hillary Clinton just pushed his buttons, and by the end of the debate, he just unraveled. But he wrote the lead of the story. He wrote the lead of the story.
Just for those who did not see that moment, let's play that moment that everyone's talking about.
One of the prides of this country is the peaceful transition of power, and that no matter how hard fought a campaign is, that at the end of the campaign, that the loser concedes to the winner. Not saying that you're necessarily going to be the loser or the winner, but that the loser concedes to the winner and that the country comes together in part for the good of the country. Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Well,
okay?
Chris.
And that was the moment.
Mike Pence assured the nation in no uncertain terms that they would accept the result of this election. Others went on television, including Kellyanne, and said they will accept the verdict of the voters. And he didn't. Anderson, this is core for a lot of Americans. You say, what makes America great? This is what makes America great. And the fact that he wasn't willing to say, I'll accept the results of this election, I thought that's going to haunt him, not just through this campaign, but for a long time.
Keeping you in suspense makes it sound like this is some sort of a game or a reality TV show. I don't want to be kept in suspense.
That's right.
And I think it's very difficult. I've never heard any candidate ever in a presidential debate, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any of us is old enough to have ever heard it, to say to the American public that I won't necessarily accept the result. It is stunning to me,
Jeffrey Lord?
potentially disqualifying to me, honestly, Jeffrey.
We clearly saw two entirely different debates.
I guess so.
Let me just say to you here.
What about that moment in particular?
I'm looking at December 13th, 2000. December 13th, not the night of the election, not the next day. Al Gore
I'll tell you
concedes the
about that.
presidential. No, there is no. This is what the problem is. This is when I talk about the ruling class and elites and double standards.
Just make
there
your
was
point.
One, there
You
was
haven't
one
even made
standard.
your point yet.
There was one standard for Al Gore.
What did
He
Al
could
Gore
wait a
say?
whole- Al Gore said that he would accept the process a month late. He took it all the way to the Supreme Court. He didn't concede.
Because
No.
the state-
Let him finish.
No, Gloria. He did it because he feels like a privileged insider, and his pals felt like privileged insiders. And this permeates the entire system, and this is what's wrong.
That was because Florida, because there was such a narrow margin, Florida had an automatic recount because the laws of the state of Florida called for that. And because the election was so close, and don't forget, Al Gore won the popular vote by 500,000, but we won't talk about that because this is about electoral
That's
college.
right.
And because the state of Florida said automatic recount, Al Gore said yes. And then there were 36 days in which the country was very patient.
What did
But
the
that
Supreme
is
Court have
very
to do with
different.
it? What did
But
the
that-
Supreme
wait,
Court have to do with
I
it?
didn't,
Jeffrey,
I didn't bring it to the
The
court.
election
But-
wasn't over. The election was over election night. The 50 states did not certify these winners, and the election was not over.
But-
Once the election was certified in Florida, once the court spoke and the election was certified, Al Gore stood in front of the camera.
You are illustrating
It's a different problem.
It is not.
Al Gore
Whether
did
it's
not
the
go on the
FBI
debate stage and say, I'm not so sure whether I'm going to accept the election results in his third
He
presidential
called
debate.
and said, I no longer concede.
He
That's
did
not
because
acceptable.
Florida was
Van,
recounting.
do you want to weigh in on this?
You know, this is a really sad night. I'm just going to say it. This is a very sad night for the country. You can't polish this turd. This is, I'm sorry. You cannot.
Technically, you cannot polish any turd.
Yes, exactly. But I'm just saying, look, I'm going to be very, very clear about this. Al Gore respected the Constitution, respected the process, respected every voter, went to our Supreme Court, asked for a resolution on his own terms, as did George W. Bush. And when the election results were certified, he told his party and his base to stand down and accept this, even though a lot of us were very, very upset. What you just got now was the nominee of a major party for the first time in our history, signaling to the American people that he has so little faith in our institutions, he has so little faith in our people, he has so little faith in our courts, he has so little faith in the Republican governors, the Republican secretaries of state across this country, that he will not stand in front of his own country, in front of his own nation, and say that he respects the process and the outcome. That is an outrage. The appalling lack of patriotism from this man. No,
and
the
Al Gore.
appalling.
Let him finish.
No, the appalling lack of patriotism from this man to stand there and say that, to praise Putin and Assad more than he has ever praised any American president. He doesn't talk about George Washington. He doesn't talk about Ronald Reagan the way he talks about Putin and Assad. This man has demonstrated an appalling lack of patriotism, and you should be ashamed to sit up here and defend
I'm truly perplexed to hear you talk because you're asking him to accept something that hasn't happened yet. None of us know what is going to happen on Tuesday, November 8th. And in fact, I'm going to cite for you J. Christian Adams, who was a voting attorney, voter's attorney for the Department of Justice, said that there are as many as 4 million dead people registered to vote right now. There is voting fraud out there.
That's not voting fraud. That's not voting fraud.
Well, 4 million people, dead people vote and determine the election.
No.
That is in fact fraud.
They're not voting. You're making that up.
No, but they're listed.
Because they just died.
And we have a video, by the way, and I hope voters will
They
go
just
watch.
died. Nobody's removed
Can you
them
let me
yet.
finish? I know you guys like to scream over me and not let me get my point out, but let me finish really quickly. There's a video out there. It just came out 2 days ago. Democratic operatives hired by Hillary Clinton, hired by the DNC, talking about busing people in to vote under many dead people's names, people who haven't showed up to vote yet, voting them and taking them to different polling places in a mass voter fraud operation. There's a video video of it. You can see it.
Kayleigh, in my
it's
state of Pennsylvania,
it came out of their mouth.
Let her finish. Okay.
In Jeffrey's state of Pennsylvania, we litigated this issue for a full year because the legislature passed and the governor signed into law a requirement that says you've got to show a photo ID. In a year of litigation, literally not one single case of in-person voter fraud could be documented. It's a total. Listen, I want to say something. If I can just finish my thought. I think that your man was having the best debate night that he had of all three debates.
And guess what? One line won't detract
from that. Now I'd like to finish.
One line won't detract from that.
Now I'd like to finish. With two glaring exceptions. The first that we're all noting here, where he just won't accept the result. He so easily could have said, but for the most unusual of circumstances, of course I'll accept the outcome. And let's not underestimate the significance of what happened at the end. He is desperately behind among college-educated females, and he looked at a college-educated female and then some and said, what a nasty woman. Explain that to me.
You know what? I know it's very upsetting. I know it's very.
You got State Department people saying it.
It's very upsetting to my friends on the left here. I know that Donald Trump had an incredible night. He used her experience against her. He said, you've had 30 years. You talk about wanting to do all of these great things, and you've had 30 years of experience, but it's the bad experience. And we focus on one line.
That makes
the most negative thing we can find from Donald Trump. And I know the Clinton campaign and my friends on the left want to talk about it, but Donald Trump had a great night. It was vintage Donald Trump. He talked about the issues.
He made history tonight. I agree with you on
I
that.
know that's what you want to focus on, and I get that.
Patty, is this the wrong thing to focus on?
I agree with you, Kayleigh. I think the first 35, 40 minutes of this debate, he had a great night. We were talking about the issues. I thought Chris Wallace did an amazing job.
I totally
I
agree
thought
with
he
that.
was fantastic. I thought he hit them both really hard. He asked tough questions. And I will grant you that Donald Trump had a decent 40 minutes. But then, yes, this line is a deal breaker. It is an un-American line. It is anti-democratic. It goes against our democracy. It goes against our two-party system. It goes against what we believe in and what we stand for. And, you know, yes, it's a disqualifier.
I also think that he was sort of no. He was no on accepting the outcome of the election. He refuses to accept the intelligence on Russia for some
Are these
reason.
the same intelligence people who provided the
Can I
weapons of mass
finish?
destruction
Let me finish.
info from Iraq?
For some reason, he refuses to accept the intelligence on Russia. He says he didn't even apologize to his wife on the women issues because
that was a weird
it was
moment.
not true. Right.
Given that she just gave a big interview saying he apologized to her.
So it was every single thing that was laid out in front of him, he deflected or said wasn't true, or I'm just not going to accept it when it comes to the election, and then said he wouldn't apologize on the women because he never did it. So it is a Donald Trump we have seen, and the outcome of the election is clearly the sort of key and most important moment here. But on Russia also, I was sort of surprised. I know you weren't, but this has been, U.S. intelligence, more than a dozen agencies have talked about that. I don't even understand why Donald Trump wouldn't allow for the possibility that actually the hack
because
is
the
Russian.
American people have been burned with intelligence agencies telling a Republican president of the United States that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and it
so you'll
wasn't
never accept
true.
intelligence anymore.
All that it's a possibility.
I'm simply saying they're not infallible. And
we know that. We know that, but at least
Listen,
accept that it's a possibility.
Donald Trump is lucky to have committed supporters like you, under any circumstance, will say he had a good night. But there's objective evidence. Kayleigh, you guys have both said this every debate, and in each debate, then there's been polling and research that followed that showed he didn't have such a good night, and he's lost ground consistently since the first debate. And I have to tell you, this was the worst of the. He started off great. This was the worst of the three. This was a devastating night for him.
Does it seem to you at all that he can do a good 40 minutes and then start to go down rabbit holes that she
It's a
throws out at
stamina
him.
question.
Whether it's, she starts with your father gave you $14 million, wrong. And then things like that, and it does seem. Does it not seem to fluster him somewhat?
No, I don't think so.
Really?
Seriously, I don't think that. I mean, it seems to me that one of the moments here. I want to get to this here for a second. That she danced away from was when he said, "Will you give that money back?" She refused to do it. She danced around. She danced around. What I'm saying is that goes right to the core of the argument that she is duplicitous and that she takes this money and she, uses it for personal purposes. She doesn't care where it comes from. People who throw gays off roof and kill women. I mean, what is the matter here? Give the money back. How tough was that to say?
Wasn't her response that 90% of all money that's donated is used for causes?
Yeah, that was after
Great.
That was after she was caught with when only 10% of it was actually going to charitable causes, and she was put on the charity watch list by Charity Navigator, and then she re-manipulated it to be
we
more
should really
equitable.
fact check that.
To Anderson's
I
point
hope
here,
that we fact
to
check that.
Anderson's point
That's
here,
been debunked.
I do agree with you that certainly in the first debate, he went into the weeds too much. He was too defensive on certain issues, and he did that a little tonight. But he has gotten really good at turning it around to offense, and it's just incredible to me to hear people say that it's disqualifying that he wants to wait to see what happens Tuesday, November 8th, before he accepts the election. And it's not disqualifying to destroy 30,000 emails under subpoena. It's not disqualifying to take hammers to your BlackBerries. It's not disqualifying to tell 6 mistruths to the FBI that are actively contradicted in front of Congress. That's not disqualifying. You can run for president with 4-star generals sitting in jail for telling one lie to the FBI.
And that's a double standard.
You can respond.
That's a double standard.
I know there's a mythology that's already starting to set in that he did super well at the very beginning. And here's a problem. We often go on, temperament. Like we've lowered the standards for the presidency. If you just don't throw a fit, if you're not a toddler, then you're prepared to be president of the United States. I want to be very clear. I'm going to have to go all the way back to old school hip hop and quote LL Cool J in his first album and say he lied about the lies that he lied about. Listen, the entire time you're saying he's doing well, he says he never said that he wanted Japan to have nukes. That's a lie. He said he's never claimed to know Putin. That's a lie. He said he never said that women weren't pretty enough for him to harass. That's a lie. He said he never mocked disabled people. That's a lie. So he may have great temperament while he's lying, but I don't think that makes it presidential. Let's keep the record clear here. And I'm going to say,
Van, he did not mock a disabled person.
Come on.
Yes,
Wait. Did you see in the same speech where he mocked the general and mocked Ted Cruz doing the same thing?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, that's the point.
I've seen the video, yes.
This is the point. There is a video where he does the same thing, mocking other people who are not disabled.
Yeah, but he said,
in
that instance, and I know, Serge, I used to work with him at the Washington Post. He said, have you seen this guy and mock the way Serge appears because he has a disability? Listen, I think this debate, he sort of gets the most improved award, but that doesn't get him much in terms of expanding his base. I did think he was much more disciplined. He was calmer. He didn't take the bait all the time. I thought both of them were incredibly weak on jobs. None of them really, I think, channeled the anger and the pain that folks are feeling in terms of their own lives. I think Hillary Clinton basically did a laundry list of what her plan would be. He seemed to pivot to NATO in that question. But I think it is true that he seems to lose stamina as these debates go on. He seems to sort of remember slights. In that answer where he said such a nasty woman about Hillary Clinton, I think she was talking about entitlement reform at some point. It was like this thing that he couldn't even control. He just had to say it. It was such an odd moment.
It's also the puppet moment, the puppet moment where they're talking about Putin, and the question was, do you condemn? And he said, of course I condemn, but it didn't continue. They were getting into it over Putin, and she called him a puppet, and he said, no, you're the puppet.
Exactly.
And I hate to raise my children, but that's the kind of thing.
Well, she's the one with the Russian reset. The situation with Russia, she's been the Secretary of State. She's reset the whole thing. President Obama, this is their policy.
It would have been more reassuring if he were willing to actually condemn Vladimir Putin for the tyrant that he is, which he just, every time he gets an opportunity to do it, he instead goes to, wouldn't it be better if we had a better relationship with Russia? I can imagine your hero, Ronald Reagan, would be horrified by what he
President Obama is dealing with a tyrant in Cuba, and he's opened relationships on that same premise. Wouldn't it be better to have a better relationship with Fidel Castro, who's one nasty tyrant?
Jeffrey, so many of his answers, if I can say, so many of his answers tonight, I thought were measured, were controlled. He now has a better understanding of the clock than he ever has thus far. But he just can't help himself. And the interruptions truly had me wondering, is it 11:30 on a Saturday night? I mean, it was straight out of what you get from Alec Baldwin every single weekend with his imitation. But the big picture is this. He came in here needing a knockout. He didn't get it. No. So even if you want to think that he had a great night, and some aspects of it were a great night.
Passionately so.
He didn't win the night the way that he did.
You guys are ace supporters and spokespeople, but the question is, what about the voters he needs to add to the base that he has to win this election? Were they as impressed as you? My sense is that they will not be, and we'll see we'll see what the poll says, and we'll see in the coming days.
David, here's what I think was so important about tonight is Hillary was pressed very hard by Chris Wallace on the economy. You know, this is going to be Obama stimulus 2.0. What is different about your plan than Obama's? She didn't have an answer, and a lot of us sat back when Obama took office and said, okay, he's blaming Bush for the economy. Fair enough right now. How long will this last? Hillary Clinton tonight said he inherited something bad. We are still blaming Bush. There's no new plan. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has novel ideas on NAFTA, on TPP. That moves voters whose number one issue is the economy.
And by the way, there we see Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton.
I don't know that it's blaming Bush to note the fact that the quarter before he took office, the economy shrunk by 8.9%, and that we were losing 800,000 jobs the day he walked in the door.
Because of the seeds planted by Bill Clinton's housing policy.
Well, that's fine. So now you're mad at us for blaming Bush, and you want to blame Clinton. So I just want to But I just listen. Sometimes numbers and facts. Again, I'm a little bit of a nerd, but I think numbers are sometimes helpful. George W. Bush, number of jobs created, 1.3 million. Number of jobs created under Obama, 10.6 million.
Ronald Reagan, 21 million.
Yeah, beautiful. And guess what? The great thing about that is that was a time when the Western democracies were growing. When you look at our growth rate, we keep getting beat up. Oh, you're only at between 1 and 2%, 1 and 2%. Guess what? Europe, below 1%. Japan, 0. Why? Because the Western democracies are at a point of maturation in our economies that we are actually beating our peers. So you can't admit that. So what do? You go and compare us to China and India, which are growing more, but from a lower base. So again, you guys have to do funny numbers and fuzzy math. The reality is, under Obama, we've been beating our competition, and our economy right now, I'll be done. Our economy right now is 10% bigger and richer than it was at the height of the post-recession peak. So these are real numbers. We don't feel it in our pocketbooks, but it's true.
And another real number is that Barack Obama is about to become the first president in United States history to not attain 3.5% GDP. There are millions more in poverty, millions more on food stamps.
And he's beat every other, and we beat every other country in the world who's an advanced industrial country.
I just go back to the one statistic that has stuck out to me this entire election. 60% feel the economy's rigged against them.
Yeah, sure.
Rigged is an important word in this election. Donald Trump used it tonight, and by using that word, he might have just played into that feeling that a lot of Americans feel at home, that the deck is stacked against him, and it's unfortunate.
You know who else used that word? Bernie Sanders used that word.
He did.
And you know what? A lot of people feel that the economy is rigged, and you know what? They're right. But most people don't feel that the American system of voting is so rigged that someone who's won his party's nomination can't stick up for it. We should stick up for our democracy on the world stage every single time, and he failed to do it tonight, and it's a disgrace.
You know, when Trump was asked about the economy, this is the one area in which he has some advantage, and he's had a lot of advantage in polling. Lots of people believe he's best able to handle the economy. She was asked about it. She talked about her tax plan, et cetera, et cetera. When he was asked about it, he went to trade, started talking about trade, and never really, until the end of his answer, got back to what he would do for the American people. He started talking about her on TPP and all that. I think it was a huge missed opportunity for him, because it's one area where he actually does well, and he could have gotten more specific with people about how he is going to help them in their personal lives beyond trade. I know trade is a very big issue. I know it's really important, but taxes are a big issue, and what he's going to do to improve GDP, et cetera, et cetera. So I think he wasn't focused on an answer on a question that could have been terrific for him. I really do.
I think if you're going to, you cite the poll that says 60% feel the economy is rigged. And I am one who believes that the biggest single issue facing us in every mature economy is how you guarantee that people who work hard can get ahead, how you give them the best chance to get ahead in this changing economy. I think that's a real issue. But if you're going to cite the polls, then you have to accept the rest of what the poll says, which is that 60% don't think he has the temperament to be president. 60%, on a series of measures of presidential preparedness, don't feel he's qualified. So that was what he had to work on tonight. If he wants to get from point A to point B, that's what he had to do tonight, is reassure people.
Line. You've got the experience, and it's bad experience.
That is a great line. That is a great line. And the 30-year argument is a good argument. But that is not a 90-minute debate. And given what else he said, it's sort of like that old thing about how is the play otherwise, Mrs. Lincoln, you know?
And she had a great comeback, I thought, again, to the 30-year answer, where she said in the 1970s, I was down in Arkansas, you were being sued for housing discrimination. In the 1980s, so she went through decade by decade. So I thought that whole refrain, she was clearly ready for that answer.
I'm sure that was right off the top of her head.
Anderson, if I can just say, I think there are 535 people who are watching tonight who really now have an issue on their hands. And I'm thinking of the 100 Senate Republican candidates and 435 Republican candidates for the House of Representatives. Individuals like Pat Toomey in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, who thus far have really danced in terms of, are you for or against this guy? And they now are going to be asked the question tonight or tomorrow. When Donald Trump is unwilling to say that he'll accept the outcome of the election, what about you?
And they're going to say, I'll say the same thing that I said when Al Gore.
I don't think so.
No, they're not.
I don't think so.
And therein lies the problem with Washington, and that's it right there.
There's one thing we haven't talked about, and we need to talk about it, which is, for the first time, Donald Trump used Spanish. He spoke a Spanish word only to insult and smear and stereotype Latino immigrants and no other immigrants. He said we have some bad hombres. The only time this man has used Spanish in the entire election was used to stereotype and smear Latino immigrants. Not all immigrants, but Latino immigrants. I thought that was horrible. And if you look at Twitter, that's going to be another reason that the Republican Party is going to have a very difficult time being a party for all the country.
This is where we get into this politically correct.
No, it's not politically correct.
It is.
It's
nonsense. Please, America, this is nonsense.
You've got to let me finish my point. Got to let me finish my point. He was not talking about. Let's put context here instead of bringing out two words. Context. Sabine Durden lost her son at the hand of an illegal immigrant. He would still be here today if the laws were enforced.
But you cannot.
And is that man a bad hombre? A bad man? A bad hombre? Whatever you want to call that man.
You cannot do it.
It wasn't all immigrants, and that's where context is so important.
Hold on a second.
He was talking about the immigrants who have come into this country. They're a minority, yes, 100%. They're a small number. But nevertheless, there are people who would still be alive today had the laws been enforced. Americans have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Everyone.
Absolutely.
And no one should die at the hands of an illegal immigrant.
No one should die at the hands of anybody.
Exactly.
And I tell you what, there's something
unless
wrong.
they're a baby.
Hold on a second.
Unless they're a baby in the 19th.
There's something wrong when you take funerals and you politicize funerals. I've gone to plenty of them. I've seen people killed by police. I've seen people killed by, I've seen African American kids killed by other African American kids. I've seen Latino kids killed by other Latinos. I've seen people killed by people with papers, without papers. The reality is, when you start cherry picking, and you say, well, I'm going to pick these particular ones and use that to beat up a whole community, that is disgusting, it's wrong, and people understand what you're doing. It's not right.
Let's play this again, just for those who maybe didn't see it. Let's play the moment, the moment that's gotten a lot of coverage online.
We're going to secure the border, and once the border is secured, at a later date, we'll make a determination as to the rest. But we have some bad hombres here, and we're going to get them out.
What was your reaction?
No, this is not politicizing someone's death, Van. This is really important here. And if we want to talk about picking and choosing which deaths to care about, President Obama has cared about certain men who have died at the hands of police officers. Your idea about politicizing deaths, I assume it applies to your own president. It's not politicizing deaths to care about a certain group of people. And Donald Trump cares about the fact that kids in New Hampshire have died of heroin that has been brought in here by illegal immigrants. There are people who have lost.
My father immigrated
one at a time,
this country
Patty.
from Mexico illegally twice, was deported twice, came back the third time legally. To me, I was born here. I'm an American citizen. To me, that was very offensive. You heard me when we were watching it in the green room. I was aghast at it. I went, that's just offensive. It's offensive to Hispanics. It's offensive to Mexicans. Bad hombre.
Oh, come on, Patty. Patty, you're an American. I'm an American. I've heard that phrase all my life. That has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
Where do you hear that? Why do you think where do you hear it?
No, this line has been an American.
Where do you hear that phrase?
American television westerns in the 1950s. He's a bad hombre.
1950s.
My goodness.
I'm not. By the way, I'm not sure 1950s American television is the best benchmark for what is good language and what's not offensive.
I have never heard that compared to, say, the N-word. Right?
Okay.
Right?
But Jeffrey,
this
why
is
do you
political
think he used that phrase? Why didn't he just say bad dudes? Why didn't he just say bad dudes?
Because there are dudes that would be offended if you say dudes. Because somebody would come up with this.
Why did he specifically use Spanish in that instance?
Well, what's wrong with it? There's nothing wrong with it.
So why do you think he did it, though? I mean, just because he's quoting the 1950s
colloquial, it's in the American language.
No one says that. No one says that, Jeffrey.
You don't know enough people.
Maybe it's
But here's the thing.
1950s movies.
Donald Trump has defended the language he uses and says about women, I don't say things like that. That's not what I do. Well, tonight, Patty was very offended. And
Patty, I love her
I
to
think
death,
she
but
has
she's
a
just
lot
being
more
politically
credibility
correct.
than I do on that.
All right.
And if she's offended, I'm offended.
I can't even believe what I'm hearing.
goodness.
That we live in such a high offense culture that when you call someone who has killed American citizens bad hombres, and we're going to critique the language you use, two words you chose to use. This is such a high offense culture, and this is why. By the way, I want to point out really quick. This is why Donald Trump won this nomination, because Americans around this country are fed up.
And it's why
with
he's
the high
going to lose the
offense
presidency, most
culture that we
likely.
have.
Thank you, Nia. So here's the deal. This is not about being a high offense country. I agree with you. There are some people who are just chronically aggrieved, and no matter what you do, they're gonna. I'm in meetings with them all the time. Trust me. So I get what you're talking about, but this is not that. This is something else. This is a sense that we've not yet heard him say very many positive things about the contribution of the Latino immigrant community. We have
We just don't play it.
Hold on a second. Let him finish. Let me finish.
He doesn't trumpet it. He had an opportunity to say nice stuff tonight. We talked about immigration tonight. He had a huge opportunity to try to repair some damage with a community. He could have said, "Listen, we got some bad ones, but let me tell you a little bit about the good ones, the ones who are making a difference, who are making a contribution." He did like George W. Bush used to do. He didn't do that. And then to put the cherry on top of the awful Sunday, he then says there's some bad hombres, which sounds to people for whom
politically correct.
No,
it's offensive, Jeffrey. Period. End of story. It's offensive.
Okay, to say he hasn't raised the
Let's stop talking about how offensive
He stood beside the Mexican president and praised the contributions of the Mexican American community. He's done this time and time again. There are so many good immigrants in this country, but there are some very bad ones, and we never get to the root of the problem because we're all upset about the term bad hombre.
Okay, but let's stop talking about how offensive it is. He was supposed to broaden his base tonight. He was supposed to expand his voters today, right? Yes?
Yes, of course.
He offended Hispanics.
No.
He offended women. He offended other minorities. How did he expand his base tonight? How is he going to win the presidency?
This is exactly the point, Patty, is that you divide by race. Van and I have famously had this conversation.
I'm not
that when you divide by race like this and think of people as not Americans, but by their nationality.
But
am I supposed to take offense if somebody says I'm a wasp?
But Jeffrey, her question was,
and I'm not totally.
Her question was more, what new groups did he reach out to and actually get tonight? Did he?
Sure. People who are sick of this nonsense. I mean, to think that this is limited to any particular group or age, is crazy. They're all Americans. They're all human beings. They all have different views of it. They are individuals.
Right. No, I'm just wondering if, like, tonight, but I feel like those people he's probably already gotten. So was there anyone new?
I have an idea. I think that when Donald Trump goes into private life, which he will be doing very soon, he should take out a patent on a self-kicking machine, because that is his brand now. He had a complete opportunity tonight to go out there and repair some damage with some constituencies to show that he actually gets it. See, the thing is, you don't get to determine what offends me. I don't get to determine what offends you. That's
what you guys are doing.
No, hold on a second.
You're determining that the whole entire Hispanic American community.
I'm only looking at Twitter. I'm sorry,
Twitter is not much of a
Twitter. That's that scientific sample right there.
Well, let's watch tomorrow. But my point is, if I say something to you that you find offensive, it's my job to listen to you and figure out, in the name of civility. So we used to call it civility. See, the basis of civilization. They became politically correct only when certain other people started insisting on civil treatment. But if I tell you something and you say that offended me, it's my job, in the name of civility, to listen to you and try to do a better job next time. The problem we have right now is you got a certain set of people in the country that say, you telling me that you're offended means you're the problem, not me. Not my speech, your response to my speech. And we'll never have a country that way.
Or if you tell me that I might lose, it's not my fault. It's not because I failed. It's because the election was rigged.
Or
I think it's sort of the same line of reasoning, and I don't want to change the subject from but on the failed election issue and the question of legitimacy, Lindsey Graham, no fan, I get it, no fan of Donald Trump, tweeted that if he loses, it's because he failed. Period. Now, this is a senator, member of Congress. To Michael's good point before, there are members of Congress who watch this and who are up for re-election. And what if, I spoke with a House member the other day who said to me, what if I win in my state and Donald Trump loses and challenges the election? What does that do to me and my election? Are my voters disenfranchised? Are my votes illegitimate? I mean, this is an issue. Donald Trump is about Donald Trump, not about the Republican Party, and I think that's what this is about.
This is a good issue, and 2 points. Number one, to my friend Michael, which I just sent you there, an article in the New York Times about a federal judge in Philadelphia overruling a Pennsylvania state Senate election and throwing a Democrat out of the state Senate, giving control of the Senate to Republicans, because he said the Democrats stole the election and they used a dead person's vote, among many others, to accomplish it. This is a problem. I've been reading tonight about a Princeton professor who does this enormous study about how easy it is to hack voting machines, saying there is a problem here. Will we recognize the problem?
Is this anecdotal, or at this point, or is it a huge
I think when you've got all these people and CBS and all these other places, reputable institutions, Princeton University, saying that these elections can be stolen in a blink, in essence, we've got a huge problem. We shouldn't be trusting computers. Then, yeah, there's a problem. Yes.
You said you don't want people divided by race. Let me just say one thing, and then I want to make a larger point. One is, I know Patty, and I've known her since she was a young woman, and
she still is.
She's one of the most inspiring people I know. She has a wonderful story, and when she tells me that she's offended, I take that seriously. I don't say, who are you to say whether a lot of Hispanics were. No, but Kayleigh said that to her. Here's a thing, but let's not talk about Hispanics, blacks. I think Americans were offended by what Donald Trump said about not accepting the result of the election. Yep. Americans, black, white, Hispanic, Asian. How many
were offended when Al Gore did this? How many?
Jeffrey, you rail against Washington, but you're using like political consultant answers here.
David, you set
and I say that as a self-loathing political consultant.
I am not a political consultant. and you said
no, but
your party.
That's nonsense.
No, it is not
the
nonsense.
election was not settled. There was a dispute about that. And as it was said before, if he had said tonight, look, absent some extraordinary event like a dispute, of course I'll accept the result. It didn't trouble his running mate to say it. It didn't trouble his campaign manager to say it. Why does it trouble him to say it? Why?
Jeffrey, if there's a divide when it's all over between the Electoral College and the popular vote, no one will question Mr. Trump for pursuing to get to the bottom of exactly what the result was. But here we are at a stage when he's trailing by double digits in several national polls, and the swing states have all shifted away from him. And at this moment, he's saying that he thinks the whole thing is rigged against him, and then he tries to conflate media bias with the rigging of an election, which are two totally separate issues.
Well,
and that's where it falls short.
They're not in terms of being influential in deciding an election. They're not. I mean, the old Soviet Union only ran Pravda, right?
Whether there's bias in the media and election fraud are two separate issues, is what I'm saying. One doesn't bleed into the other.
Jeffrey, it's about, to a great degree, when you become president and you're a leader, you have to accept responsibility for everything that happens on your watch.
Right, like I did not have sex with that woman.
Good or bad. I don't want to, I'm just saying, this is a role of a leader in general.
Right.
This is what leaders ought to do, accept responsibility. Part of the responsibility of being a leader is, if you don't succeed and you lose, you accept responsibility for the loss. If you win, good for you. You did a great job.
I just have to say, Rush Limbaugh said this today, and I think it's so true. He said it, no matter what station you turn on, everybody is operating on the premise that Donald Trump's about to lose. There's a Fox News poll that just came out. He's still only 6 points behind. There was another poll, the Reuters poll today. He's 4 points behind. We were sitting here 23 days ago. The momentum was going in Donald Trump's direction. We have 19 more days. None of us knew 2 days ago that we were going to get FBI 302s showing quid pro quo. The phrase is in there between the State Department and the FBI. None of us know what's coming in the WikiLeaks. None of us know where we're going to be 20 days from now. And I think we shouldn't operate under the premise, one, that he's going to lose, and two, that he's not going to accept the result. He said maybe. He's going to look at what happens. He said that is fair.
He said
none of us know what's going to happen.
Well, I can just tell you, because I've been involved in campaigns for a long time, and presidential campaigns for a long time. No one has, in modern history, recovered from a deficit like this. Tonight was his opportunity to try and turn that around, and he's just dug himself into a bigger hole. And frankly, the arguments you guys are making is also digging him into a deeper hole.
David, no one in modern history has won a primary spending only half of what three of their opponents spent. No one has ever won in modern history.
I appreciate your undying commitment. I'm just telling you what the facts are.
I want to make a point here that goes back to the very first segment of the show tonight, which was on the Supreme Court, and there are two different views on the Supreme Court. When you're saying Donald Trump is not accepting of tradition, et cetera, et cetera. There are, and in terms of conceding an election, there are lots of people in this country, Justice Scalia was one, who believe that there are a lot of people like Hillary Clinton who believe that the Constitution is to be ponied around with here to fit whatever is their latest objective, instead of accepting what is in the Constitution and the basic freedoms for all of us. That is, in essence, a coup d'etat in a slow fashion motion here, using the Constitution. What does that have to do with
what I was saying,
see, and the fact that you don't get that, that's what it has to do with.
Jeffrey, I think you're not hearing what I mean. What I was saying was, as if you lose, you accept responsibility. If you win, good for you. You take the credit for it. Period.
You guys have an actual point to make.
This is about elections, not the Constitution.
Listen, you guys have an actual point to make here. Republicans could be excused for feeling that there's a double standard when it comes to sexual conduct, Bill Clinton versus Donald Trump. They could be excused for saying that,
in a whole lot of areas.
Well, hold on. I'm trying to help you here, but you got to give me a little bit of room. The idea of there being some media bias, of there being a double standard, I think you guys have a case to make. The problem is when you overshoot your skis the way that you do, and you say that this media bias, this particular thing, then gives you a rigged election. But you don't have the same critique of the media when Donald Trump is winning the primaries one after the other. Then the media is fine. You don't have a critique of the media when Republicans are winning the Senate. No critique when they win the House. No critique. 30-plus governorships. No critique. You only have this critique of the media and concern, and it's peril for democracy when it affects your guy in the last hour, and that looks hypocritical.
No, a lot of us were critiquing the media in the primary as well. And by the way, to suggest that this is a Republican thing, there's a reason why in Gallup recorded history, the media is at its lowest rate of trust. And Gallup recorded history.
I'm giving you the bias argument. I'm giving you the bias argument. But when you undermine confidence in American voting institutions, listen, the media has been a mess from the beginning. The American media system used to be deliberately partisan. Every party had its own newspaper. People had flyers, and it was a total crap show. Then you wound up with this sort of forced, homogenized thing. It was fake from the beginning. Now it's getting all exciting and crazy again. You got social media. But the media,
which is good.
Hey, and I have no problem with it. I'm happy to be
Twitter.
Here. I'm happy to be tweeting. I'll be tweeting at the commercial break if we ever have one. I have no problem with that.
At this rate, or not.
The problem that I have is that you love the polls when the polls are going your way. Donald Trump, the polls. They don't go his way. I don't believe the polls.
By the way, Donald Trump, to his own credit, has even admitted that in his speech. In his speech, he said, I quote, the polls when they go my way, I don't know.
So my point, Anderson, is simply this. If you love the media when it's with you, and you hate it when it's against you, you love the polls when they're with you, you hate them when you're against you. You're many things. You're not presidential, and that's the point. This is about who is going to be the president of the United States. I've got a 12-year-old son that has a much better attitude toward competition than the guy running for president in your party.
But yet the one who's qualified is the one who couldn't get a basic security clearance if she was an average everyday citizen.
Can I just make one point? And I want to explain why what Donald Trump said tonight about the election disturbs me, and what has disturbed me over the last few weeks. I think it is insidious to tell your supporters that if you're not going to win, that the result is rigged, the result is fixed, sort of intimate that, anything goes if you don't win. That is not American. That is not fundamental. That is not.
It's not Al Gore.
Jeffrey, don't do that. It is beneath you. It is beneath you.
I am sorry.
It is beneath you.
This was done.
Al Gore, you believe me, as Van said, there were many, many people in this country who wanted him to fight on.
I was one of them.
And he said, I think it's best for the country to accept the result. He was a hero in that instance.
Al Gore was on his way to concede when the Secretary of State, it was under 1%. The Secretary of State said this is an automatic recount. He had already called Bush because he was going to do the right thing. Then when there was a recount, only after they knew that it was an automatic recount, did he call Bush and say, no,
this just
we
reeks
have
of
to
one standard
wait.
for me and another
You
for
should
thee.
climb
That's
it
the
off.
way
You
this
should
plays.
climb it off this
Jeffrey.
rickety brown.
Jeffrey, you, the student of history, what troubles me the most about what he said and what he didn't say tonight is Wednesday, November 9. I have committed that come the 9th of November.
Look, if he loses, I want him to concede.
No, I want to make this point. But regardless,
let him finish what he's saying.
We need to put the pieces back together when this thing ends. And come Wednesday the 9th, I'm not obsessing about him saying what he said about Mexico sending us its rapists and his tax returns. I'm moving on if he's the president.
Right.
And if she wins, no more email server, no more. It's time to put it back together and move forward.
We got to take a break. Coming up, Who Won the Debate will reveal the first results for our exclusive instant poll of debate watchers, and we'll hear from our focus group of undecided voters here in Nevada. Stay with us.
Join the club that gives you stuff.
Hey, thanks!
Radio Loyalty.
Here's how it works.
Just click on the Radio Loyalty banner right now and sign up. Then you keep on listening like you already do. But now you earn points. Those points add up, and you can trade them in for stuff in the Radio Loyalty store. Earn more points by sharing your station with friends on Facebook and Twitter, answering surveys, and by using the apps in the New Players App Store. Pretty simple, right? Radio Loyalty. Click that banner to join now.
You're listening to the station with their ear to the streets. BeExposedRadio.com.
Are you thinking about getting your GED diploma? Well, here at the GED Pep Talk Center, we've got a number of pep talks that can motivate you.
Sometimes things don't always turn out the way you want them to.
You know that feeling? People look at you and don't believe in you.
You want some gentle encouragement. Then you're on your way to your GED diploma and a better life.
But I know you're probably just a little bit nervous. You can find it in yourself to take that first step.
You can improve your future. You can do this. I know you can.
You need to start pushing yourself.
Now get your game face on and take the first step towards a better life. Hurry up. Don't make me repeat myself.
Whatever level of motivation you need to get your GED diploma, we've got a pep talk that's right for you. Call 1-877-38-YOUR-GED or visit yourged.org for your pep talk and find free GED classes in your area. GED is a registered trademark of the American Council on Education. Brought to you by Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
When you were a little kid and you thought about what you wanted to be, teaching was at the top of your list. But things changed. And as you got older, teaching didn't seem like the best option anymore. So you're thinking you'll be something else. But what would your 12-year-old self say? Now you want to be a doctor. You don't think teachers save lives? 25 at a time. An actress? Try playing a different role every time the bell rings. How about a scientist? Ever heard of physics? Chemistry? Who do you think teaches that? Teachers today are breaking down obstacles, finding innovative ways to instill old lessons, and taking learning far beyond the four walls of the classroom. It's time to recognize that great things are happening in teaching and put it back on your list. Don't try to convince yourself otherwise. You had it right the first time.
Find out how you can make more at teach.org. Make more. Teach. Brought to you by Teach and the Ad Council.
55% say yes. His attacks on Hillary Clinton were fair. 43% say no. And what about the attacks on Donald Trump? An even bigger majority say her attacks were fair. 63% say that about
Driving has a rhythm all its own. Don't wreck it with a text. Before you get behind the wheel, silence your phone. Or better yet, designate a texter. For more text-free driving tips, visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
This message is for all of you sitting in the passenger seat. And apologies if it gets a little uncomfortable. But how does it feel to be at the mercy of someone who thinks a random text is more important than your life? Someone who takes their eyes off the road while speeding along in a 3-ton hunk of steel. Freaky, right? Well, why not just ask them to stop? Or better yet, volunteer to text for them. It might be a little awkward, but believe me.
If someone says that more money may create more problems for us who don't have a lot of money, we say, nah, that'll never be me. And when we look at the statement that's made by those who are making over six figures, millionaires, I dare say billionaires, we wonder, how is it that more money can cause more problems? Well, I can kind of understand how that may be the situation if the money that you have is not going towards things that are of a worthy cause. And that looks how you perceive it to be. If you feel like money should make you free, but after making more money, it traps you towards these things that will cause you to have to get more money to feel like you're free, then that's a vicious cycle that someone I can understand will not necessarily feel like they're the benefactor of. So